Welcome, everybody, and to our February 25th, 2026 regular council meeting. My apologies for starting a few minutes behind. I was at the Wounded Warrior event, but I can talk about that later. Just want to start by respectfully acknowledging that the land on which we're gathered today is on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. And I know I didn't tee this up, but Councillor Morin, did you want to speak to the numbers? Oh.
As is our practice, this is the quarterly statement around the toxic drug crisis. So on behalf of Courtenay Council, I would like to acknowledge the deaths of 4 Comox Valley community members in the period of September to December 2025 due to the unregulated toxic drug supply crisis, for a total of 231 deaths of Comox Valley community members since the public health emergency was first declared. I want to also say that the deaths have started to, the number has gone down, but that's still 4 lives in this period, and we want to recognize them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Morin, and just recognizing that it's your motion that got us where we do recognize these numbers. So I want to thank you for that as well, and appreciate you jumping in at the last minute on that one. I don't hear of any late items. I'll get to it. What's the council? Yeah, I haven't been briefed on any potential things, but that's why we have it on the agenda.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just was hoping that we could add item under correspondence for the letter from the Minister of Health regarding the Comox Valley Hospice Society.
Okay. So just adding the letter, and then if we add that to the agenda, we can speak to it once we get to that item. Okay, so that'll come under 5.3. I'll make a little note here. It's for receipt, but oh, sorry, for receipt. But once it's received, we can speak to it as well if a council member wanted to. Okay, I think did that get emailed out to all of council? No, okay. All right, going into adoption of minutes. Oh, do we need to vote on the late item?
Okay, if people are happy with it, then it's just we're adding it unanimously. If you want to take a vote now, mover and second, can do that too.
Anybody opposed? Seeing none, we'll add it by consensus. Thanks very much, and move on to adoption of minutes for the regular council meeting from February 11th. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, we will move, or we'll accept those unanimously as well, and move on to staff reports from Development Services. We have the Downtown Revitalization Local Plan Phase 3 scope of work, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to acknowledge all the hard work that's happened across our departments. This is a report on the next and third and final phase of this project. We have a comprehensive staff report in front of you. If council had questions, staff are available here that have been involved directly in the project.
Oh, do you want to let Councillor Jolicoeur go first? Councillor Jolicoeur.
Is there a staff report coming, like a presentation, that is?
No, through the mayor to council, we didn't have a presentation. We have the report. Okay. So if you had questions about it, that's great. Most our staff are here to address those. We're just going to point council to the recommendation to move forward with the scope of work, which is on page 16 of the agenda. We have 2 options there, and one is that we're recommending to move forward on the phase 3 scope of work as described in attachment 1.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the really thorough report. Really nice to see things moving along, and for all the hard work of staff and from community members and organizations for participating in this process. I did have two questions, Mayor, if that's okay. One was around on page 3 of the staff report. It speaks to 3 components that are excluded from this process because they'll be covered in other initiatives that staff are undertaking. And specifically, my question is around the implementation strategy. And so I guess, you know, in our initial discussions around the consolidation of all these local area plans, we had conversations initially around quick action items. And I recognize in phase 2 reports from the fall, it spoke to project sheets for specific public realm amenities that might be created through this process. And so I'm just kind of curious if staff could speak to whether or not that is included in the implementation strategy, or if the implementation strategy is really just the work that will be done as a result of the LEP on other bylaws and the OCP.
Hang on, let's get the podium turned on. There we go.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So good eye and memory from that last report that talked about the project sheets. The project sheets actually for the public realm are still considered feasible within this phase. It's really helpful that we are having some concurrent work from the strategic transportation plan and that overlapping consultant on both those projects who saw that as still as something that can be, like I said, fit into this phase. And then, of course, Harmston, it will be an action that follows very directly from this. So that's one of those action items as well. And then, yeah, so I guess I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, if I can, Mayor, on that. So the project sheets, that I guess is where my passion lies, is my understanding those would be the quick items for council to consider for capital improvements in the capital realm. Those will be ready for our review at the DVLAP final adoption phase.
That's correct. That is the intention, and that they'd have some high level cost estimates in them to help inform some of that future financial planning.
All right, thanks, Councillor Schulker and Councillor Morin.
Thank you, Mayor. I see that the heritage protection is also one of those items that's not included, and there is some explanation there, which is great. I have had a few people talking about aspects of heritage protection, mostly I think because of the Bill 44 and also just the changes that we've seen across the region, but and particularly in Courtenay. I just wondered if there's anything else you can add around that in terms of what we may do in the future, what options are available. I know that you're not able to go into a great deal of detail, but just if there's anything else you can add to that paragraph that's there.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Heritage is a topic that was expressly identified in the Bill 44 amendments, all those housing requirements from the province. And so staff are a little unsure what that meant for future heritage designation. Now, we did retain the services of an expert on heritage, and they have identified that there is still opportunity to do heritage protection even with small scale multi-unit housing zoning. It becomes more challenging when they're very small lots, but basically if you can continue to permit the density, you can protect for heritage. So trying to understand what that could mean for the downtown is, yes, something we did want to look at a little bit more to understand what tools we could use, but the actual enabling bylaws of protecting land for heritage purposes, that would not occur in this particular exercise.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Morin and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I don't have much of a question, but I really appreciate this getting done, and it looks to be another $75,000 to finish the work. So I'd be happy to move the recommendation. Thanks.
It's been moved and seconded, and back to Councillor Zuliker.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just my final kind of curiosity, and it's more around the timeline and the process, having just walked by the Harmston Park storyboards today and reminded that this project's about a year-ish delayed. And so, and this might be for our planning staff, or might be for our city manager, but just kind of curious how we see the implementation of the DVLAP playing into, for example, the next financial plan for council? Is there a specific direction, whether now or once we approve the DVLAP, that staff will need for us to take action around the implementation?
Want to speak to that, Mr. Garber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the council to Councillor Jolicoeur. I think we'll look at what's being developed through this process. As for timing, it's important as we start our financial planning, but it looks like Ms. O'Connell has maybe a little bit more information than I do on this, so I'll turn the mic over to her.
Thanks very much. So Councillor Jolicoeur, excellent question. And it's challenging in the sense that the way that the agenda gets set up is that we have the DVLAP project under staff reports, but then we have the OCP report and bylaw further on in the agenda. And the two are really connected when it comes to a strategy and approach for the implementation of those plans. So a bit of foreshadowing to the OCP report is including a recommendation to pull out the implementation priorities from the bylaw itself and to get direction specifically from council to create an external OCP implementation plan that models that proactive planning cycle, includes the connection and or the connectivity of those plans with other strategies, the capital plan, the financial planning process. With the first scope report, if it's approved and as directed by council, to be coming back to council's consideration as part of the 2026 council strategic priority planning after the general election, that would then inform the 2027 and beyond financial plan. So if you're interested in what that looks like, the really fleshed out version of it is under the administrative implication section of the OCP report. But because the DVLAP is under that larger umbrella, that's where it will fall ultimately as part of that greater implementation plan that creates those connections and links it with your financial planning process.
All right, thanks for that. And Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. Excuse me, just regarding the communication and engagement plan, which started about, I don't know, a year ago, maybe. And there's some things highlighted in the report around, excuse me, the engagement that's already occurred. But I think it's just helpful to, again, highlight that there's been engagement throughout the whole process, and there will be more engagement ongoing, because I think sometimes people just think no one's talked to me, or I haven't had an opportunity for input. So I just wanted to highlight that. And I don't know if you can just speak to what's happening next around communication and engagement. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the communications and engagement plan had actually been scoped very early on in this process. So we're working off some of that original direction from about a year ago, but we will continue to use the webpage to its maximum potential. Certainly there has been some Q&A kind of dialogue that happens on there, and sometimes some follow-up discussions that staff have with individual people, whether that be by phone or email or the front counter. There will definitely be a public open house. That's actually been an addition since the project was originally scoped. It was actually, we were going to be a little more virtual, but the popularity of the open house that was held last May just showed that that's the right fit for this work right here. And similarly, the interest holder and intergovernmental workshops, those more targeted conversations with BIA, maybe certain government partners, we will continue to have those as well. So in many ways, it is actually kind of mirroring the phase 2 engagement. I would say though, minus the survey. We did have the survey in phase 2, which is appropriate to kind of be asking those expansive questions. But now we will be formalizing the plan and more checking in with people on the finer details.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
All right, I think that has answered most of the questions. Yep. So all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. Next, we have Habitat for Humanity land disposition, 2140 Lake Trail Road. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Garber.
And thank you through the mayor to council. We're very excited to have this status update and next steps on the 2140 Lake Trail Road transfer to Habitat for Humanity. It's a very long time coming. Scott Hainsworth, our manager of procurement, risk and real estate, is going to introduce this report, and I'm going to assist him if there's any adjacent questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Through the city manager to mayor and council, this report before you is to seek approval to transfer the city-owned property located at 2140 Lake Trail Road to Habitat for Humanity. The subject property was acquired by the city in 2011 as part of an amenity contribution associated with the Arden Road Development's rezoning. At this time, the lot was explicitly intended to be transferred to Habitat for Humanity for the delivery of affordable housing rather than retained for long-term municipal purposes. Council previously considered this matter in August 2022 and approved the transfer of the property for $1, subject to conditions intended to maximize housing outcomes and secure those outcomes through a covenant on title. Habitat for Humanity has since reconfirmed its interest in the site and has advised that it intends to proceed with development under current zoning, with anticipated build out of 3 to 4 housing units focused on affordable home ownership opportunities for families within Courtenay. The report before you today brings this matter forward to complete the disposition, including providing public notice in accordance with the community charter and registering a covenant on title requiring a minimum of 3 dwelling units. Staff are also recommending development cost charges, permit fees, and offsite servicing costs be funded through the city's affordable housing reserve, with staff returning to council at a later date to confirm these costs and seek approval for the associated expenditure. Staff are therefore recommending approval of the land transfer and related direction under as outlined in the report.
Thanks very much for that. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. You mentioned 3 to 4 units that's what it's zoned for currently. And I'm not really familiar with the exact size of the lot, though I do remember it being fairly small, but is that like our staff feeling like that's the best use for that? Or does that just seem like this easiest path for Habitat to get something built at this point?
Mr. Courtenay.
Yeah, thank you through the mayor. I'll field that question. So many years ago, it's effectively a single residential lot that was developed. Under our previous conversations, when we talked with council, we were trying to maximize the yield on that property. It has some particular nuances there. There's a statutory right of way that runs along the edge of the property. So it is a fairly limited development. So under these small scale multi-unit regulations we have in there, a maximum they can do is 4. They're going to strive for 4, but at a minimum they're going to do 3, and that's the townhouse, the row house model that they use at their Piercy project. So realistically, the yield, unless we go significantly like a rezoning with height, it would be pretty challenging to pull that off, largely because of that statutory right of way along there. So from our assessment, that a yield of 3 on what originally was likely a single unit property would be a reasonable and achievable outcome if there weren't the constraints and we that we could really push, or if there was an opportunity for consolidation or something like that. I think it'd be really great. It's just a manageable project for them right now, and it is one specific area of affordable housing that has not been the focus of any development since the single unit at Newport across from the Walmart complex, and that's affordable ownership. So it's our perspective. I think that it's a reasonable and achievable within a good timeline as well. They can effectively move forward as soon as the transfer happens.
Right, and this lot is like directly adjacent to Tarling Park, if I remember correctly. And I don't know where the statutory right of way is, but does it lend itself to a possibility to have like active transportation? I know there's half of a trail getting partway from 13th over to Lake Trail, and kind of it dead ends and goes into the woods, which is great. But I guess coming from the other end on Lake Trail, I don't know if you've thought about that statutory right of way and what it might yield for connecting those paths.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor. We'd potentially like to look at utilizing the park itself as a connectivity, because the end of 13th, the future development of those properties that make the Arden corridor, I think there's a potential to utilize that there because it's such a small property. The idea is that they could utilize that statutory right away with non-permanent structures to make it more feasible. So I think long answer to say our preference on an active connection would be through the park in order
Yeah.
to facilitate the affordable housing.
Great, that makes sense. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question is actually just around this last piece of what we're being asked to consider around the DCCs and our affordable housing reserve. So in the absence of a policy, and this might be less towards you, Scott, and more towards either our CFO or our city manager, but in the absence of a policy around the affordable housing reserve, I don't think, at least on my term on council, we've had a project come forward that was ownership based. Most of them have been rental based. And so, yeah, just kind of curious if this is something that we should include in the work to consider the city's policy position on subsidizing, albeit affordable housing, but affordable owned, home-ownered housing projects.
Mr. Garber?
Thank you through the mayor. I would say, correct, we haven't yet done the work to broaden or further define support for affordable housing. And other than it's affordable, as you pointed out, it is one of the portions of the housing wheel that hasn't been addressed. And because of the nature of that organization and how they effectively use covenants to control the escalation of costs, because it, as an owner, it can be sold. It's a time-tested method in North America that's been utilized. So at this point, without any additional policy work, we see this as appropriate and consistent with the intention of our direction to use monies in our affordable housing fund. If council wanted to give us direction to, as we look more into housing, to look at that stratification of types of affordable housing, and given in years past there was almost no affordable rental housing, then there was a real focus, and as financing models and different funding programs change, it may be but more affordable ownership comes forward. It's some good policy work to do. So we definitely take some direction if council wanted to do that. But our staff that are working on housing and that type of stuff are here and hearing that. But if council wanted to give specific direction to when we review this policy, that we consider if we will choose to address affordable ownership in a different method.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just comment on that, Mayor, is that I think maybe that's something I could look at, bring a motion forward to specifically speak to the policy work at hand. And I appreciate the city manager speaking to the continuum, because we haven't had yet that fulsome conversation. I think about the good work that our Recreation and Culture Department has done around the benefit framework and continuum. I think that's probably something we might want to look at when we think about our affordable housing reserve. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. Yeah, I was just confirming, yeah, because I think, if we cast back previous to this past term, we definitely have put monies towards habitat projects in the past, and so I think that might be something that I don't know was maybe covered in the report. But so part of that that policy work is looking at what have we already done, not to say that sets the stage for something we do in the future, but definitely to acknowledge what we have done and then what needs to be done and what we want to focus on. So appreciate that. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think it'll be interesting to see what comes back with respect to the development cost charges and offsite works. And obviously the council, I assume it will be us, but the council at the time will have to make that decision. With that, I'd like to move the recommendation.
All right, it's been moved in second. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And moving into operational services, we have the Provincial Archaeological Permitting and Indigenous Engagement, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the mayor, to council, good evening. Just a brief report here. The report seeks to address a gap between provincial ARC permitting processes and the realities of emergent infrastructure responses. As we know, emergencies in themselves are not predictable in terms of timeline, and in some cases, staff are required to act immediately to protect public health, safety, and/or our environment. We understand recent provincial direction confirms that ARC permits cannot pre-authorize emergent work in our community, meaning emergencies must be regularized after the fact through post-event permitting. Therefore, when emergency responses are actioned, reporting happens after the fact, meaning the city is to a degree exposed to an increased level of legal, operational, and reputational risk, even when those actions are taken responsibly and in good faith. This challenge is not unique to Courtenay. It's being experienced by local governments across British Columbia. The issue before council is not whether we comply with provincial law. We do. I just want to confirm that. But it's about how we manage those emergency responses in a responsible way within the framework that's provided to us within the governance model. So staff are recommending a deliberate dual track approach to this process. So first, continuing to advance all the work through the formal provincial archaeological permitting process, including revising our multi-area permits, our site alteration permits, and our post-event authorizations. This maintains and will maintain full compliance within the Heritage Conservation Act and preserves statutory oversight. But in second and in parallel to this process, staff are seeking direction from council to engage with Comox First Nations at a government to government level, seeking to co-develop an emergency infrastructure and cultural heritage response protocol. This protocol is intended to complement, not replace, provincial regulations. The proposed protocol would be to establish clear expectations well in advance of emergencies, including notification processes, coordination, guardian involvement where practical, and post-event review. The protocol would apply to only bona fide emergencies. It would not accelerate routine operations, maintenance, or planned capital projects. It's really about building relationships and building trust. From a risk management perspective, this structured and transparent framework presents less exposure than an unmanaged emergent post response that we typically do. And the co-development approach strengthens governance, improves clarity during emergencies, and supports respectful Indigenous engagement while preserving the city's ability to act decisively when required. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
So thanks for bringing this forward. And Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. I was wondering if we're like the first municipality around here to think of this, or it seems like it applies to all four of us.
It's a great question. Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Frisch. In this format, in this sense, we would be the first within the Comox Valley. The reality is, as I was researching this, as we received feedback through our multi-area permit process that we're working with our archaeologists to encompass the works within our community, it really isn't a broad use. The legislation has recently changed. The case law that's being established is really pointing in this direction in terms of being proactive versus reactive. The only other examples that I could really find that are bona fide within communities are the Metro Vancouver scenario where they have a similar set, but only for the area around the water reservoir and not actually within the community. So this is kind of taking some of that work and really refining it into what would sit within a community that could be representative here. And of course, these successes and these gained lessons would be shared with our community partners, both the regional district and the town and the village.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. A couple of questions that are related. I guess when we're talking about emergencies, we're talking floods, fires, those landslides, those types of things, and the ability for us to go in with earth moving equipment or whatever, and to have some protocol with the First Nation that permits responding in an emergent fashion. Is that basically correct?
It's a fair question. It's a little bit bigger than I think I had imagined. I was really focused on infrastructure repairs, water main breaks, sanitary breaks, but it could be that catastrophic. I think that's a much larger event that I had not originally contemplated through this dialogue and the protocol. It was about an operational response to a utility infrastructure rupture or break that was impacting our community and our livability within our community, that's confined to an area that may be an area of permits or an area, and maybe an area of interest within the RAD zoning, whereby we have built a protocol of response that Comox First Nations agrees with and participates in.
Okay, but essentially it's to get the First Nations accord on moving faster than we would otherwise.
Again, if I may just clarify, so we are allowed to move forward and post report. This would put forth an opportunity for us to discuss what's expected on the forefront. So it wouldn't impede the current practices. We're just suggesting that there is probably a better way to do this that's more inclusive, that's more engaged, that's more understanding and more respectful. So understanding what those expectations are of the city when we do that work on the front end versus the back end.
Okay, so if we had this in place, it wouldn't necessarily make any difference to, for example, the Braidwood project right now, which some consider a response to an emergency, but is substantially delayed due to archaeological permitting issues.
Mr. Garbett?
Yeah, if I may, thanks, Mr. Mayor, through the mayor. Great line of questioning, Councillor. So just to clarify, these are infrastructure related items. When we have known archaeological sites related to site development, they are dealt with slightly differently, similar principle. It's just that given the importance that our local and principal First Nation has given to this specific topic, their proactive nature, the capacity that they have, and the importance that's been communicated, combined with our council's commitment to manage and adopt the cultural heritage permitting process for our own activities, it's I think the intention here is to actually do better together. I'll steal our colleague Joanne's statement in neighborhoods, and it's a real worthwhile process because taking some of the learnings that came with the sewer conveyance project related to typical uses that we have in emergency things, including vector action and et cetera, are I think some positives there. I have reached out to the intergovernmental relations leader at KFN, the staff person, to talk about this, and we're hopeful that it will be very productive because they have also asked municipalities to work together, be consistent, and embrace these activities.
Yeah, thanks for those clarifications.
Thanks, Councillor Healing. Okay, and been moved. Been seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And from that, over to the Comox First Nation request for a letter of support for addition to reserve, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Garbett.
Well, thank you. Through the Mayor to Council, important piece of correspondence from Comox First Nation. There's good information for Council's consideration. The proposed response letter, should Council give us direction to support, is on page 252 of the agenda. Some of the reasons should Council want to move forward. It's consistent with our community plan, consistent with our support for reconciliation and co-joined economic development.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. And Councillor Moore.
I was just going to make the motion that council provide a letter of support to Comox First Nations addition to reserve application to the Government of Canada for one parcel of fee simple land held by KFN in the Piercy Road area.
Okay.
Excellent. And did you want to add the reasons that Mr. Garbett put forward just now? Because there's a section that says we can add reasons for support or not. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 17, request for a letter of support for the accessible doors project. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the council provide a letter of support to the Royal Canadian Legion, Courtenay Branch 17, regarding their application for Courtenay Legion Accessible Doors Project application to the Rick Hansen Foundation's RBC Barrier Buster Grants Program.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. All right. Yes, and I have a little star here. Thank you for that. So 5.3 is the hospice letter, and I believe did all of council get a copy of the letter? Yep. Perfect. So I don't know if anybody needs a moment to read it or has any questions. Okay, it's been moved and seconded for receipt. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm just wondering, perhaps you would like to speak to your communication, and I know Councillor Hillian in his role as well spoke to this. So I'm really proud of the advocacy that was done in response to an urgent need at one of our essential healthcare services in the community. And the letter really speaks to the appreciation from the Minister of Health around our advocacy. And it does appear like the staffing issues have been resolved, and at least 3 of the beds that were on temporary hold are now admitting patients, but not sure if you have any other thoughts. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. And I think I had shared with you possibly because it is a bit emergent, but I did speak with the Comox Valley Hospice Society as well as Golden Life just to get a bit of an update from their perspective that this crisis has basically been resolved over a period of time. But my question was really, what's the probability of this happening again? And because of the funding structure, it is there. So what I plan to do is over a period of time, working with our, not just our hospice society, but the BC Society of Hospices, I think, or association, and actually bring forward something potentially for UPCM, because this is an issue that affects every community in the province, that the manner in which these beds are funded can be sort of changed, and those beds can be lost because they're kind of lumped in with other things. So I'll bring more information on that in the future, but we have already missed the ABICC deadline. So UBCM is the next logical step, but whether or not they'll accept a direct resolution submission is yet to be seen. So Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to thank Councillor Jolicoeur for bringing this onto the agenda. Some might ask why issues of healthcare are relevant for City Council. And of course, we'll be delving into that more at the hospital board tomorrow with some significant budgetary implications for healthcare in our community. But the hospice in particular is something which many people in our community have worked long and hard to establish and to support. And it's a vital service that we've had representations at this table and at other tables in the past with regards to, and so I think it's a positive that we were able to join in the efforts to address this issue, and thankfully it's been sorted out now. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And yeah, and I think it was one of those all hands on deck situations, and our whole community came together, all the councils, and again, we were able to resolve things in this crisis. But given the fact that it's still an outstanding issue provincially, more to be forthcoming. So thanks, Councillor Hillian. And with that, that's been received unanimously. There's no motions or anything, so we'll go into internal reports and correspondence, and we have the water metering business case study executive summary. So I'll pass it over to Mr. Shaw.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. It's good to be here. So through the mayor to council, I'm pleased to present the introduction to the executive summary for the water metering business case. I'll preface a little bit with there's a lot of work that's gone into this to date. And so I wanted to take an opportunity, one, to provide an update to council, but two, also to really set the stage for what to expect as the information comes in over the consecutive council. We're planning to present a number of reports to council for your consideration. And this is really just to put a backstop to that, provide an introduction, and really showcase where we're hoping the information will guide council. So I have a bit of a presentation here to go through. So yeah, with that, let's get into it. So really, before I get started with the presentation, I wanted to take an opportunity to acknowledge the amount of work and thought that has gone into this work in developing the business case, and really thank staff and our consultants for their time and efforts thus far. It's been quite a journey, and I've been proud to be a part of it. So simply put, the business case itself was not approached as a narrow technical exercise. From the onset, staff were guided and very intentionally aligned with council's strategic direction around water conservation, equity, climate resilience, and long-term financial stability, or sustainability for that matter. The objective was to ensure that any options that staff brought forward were founded and grounded in not only industry best practices, but also in Courtenay's specific values, understanding potential risks and long-term objectives. Staff embarked on this work as what I like to describe as a journey of discovery. And we initially just set out to answer what seemed like a fairly straightforward question. What might a universal water meter program look like in Courtenay? Very quickly, we realized that answering that one question reasonably raised just as many other fundamental questions that we thought we'd highlight. Like, how would such a program be funded and over what term? What would this mean for rates and equity? And how could something like this, of this scale, be implemented in a way that is manageable for the organization and understandable for our community? We realized, and that realization led us to develop a three-part council report structure, as I alluded to, separating questions of strategic direction, financial readiness, and implementation authority. Staff aim to ensure the council retains clear and deliberate control at each stage. As council is aware, Courtenay's water system is experiencing increasing seasonal stress, particularly during the summer months. I think what's important to note through this graph is that this pressure is not being driven by population growth. In fact, peak demand has grown significantly faster than our population, which tells us how the water is being used, particularly outdoors, matters just as much as how many people live in our community. Today, most institutional, commercial, industrial, and multi-residential customers are metered, while single residential properties remain almost entirely unmetered. This creates a bit of a paradox. The customer using the most water is the one that we understand the least. We lack visibility into actual consumption patterns. We cannot detect leaks on private property or private side, and we are unable to use rates as a meaningful conservation tool. From a governance and fairness perspective, the flat rate model presents its own challenges. Financial modeling undertaken through this work has shown that the unmetered residential customer class collectively pays less for the value of the water they are estimated to consume, resulting in a cross-subsidy between the metered and unmetered accounts. So simply put, our current structure no longer reflects how we are actually using our water in our community. At this stage, it's not a single yes or no decision. It's not a request to implement anything today. It's about setting a long-term strategic direction while ensuring council retains clear control over timing, funding, and delivery. At its core, this is a platform for modernization. Our current flat rate approach to residential water metering was designed for a different time, a time when the water supply felt abundant and household level data wasn't expected, nor was it required. Many of those assumptions no longer hold true today, particularly given council's priorities on conservation, equity, climate resilience, and financial sustainability. The business case asks whether our current model still aligns with those priorities, and if not, what a more modern approach could look like. So that's why we structured, or staff chose to structure the report as three separate council reports. First, strategic direction, confirming where council wants to go. Second, the financial strategy, addressing rates, reserve, life cycle funding, overall cost. And third, implementation, dealing with bylaws, procurement, and delivery timelines. These three reports will provide evidence and context needed to decide whether residential water metering aligns with council's long-term objectives and what kind of approach best fits Courtenay. The business case also confirms three key points. First, that residential demand is the largest contributor to peak water use. Second, universal water metering is the most effective tool to address that demand, as metering provides visibility into consumption, supports leak detection, and allows residents to better understand and manage their own water use. Third, and this is not theoretical, evidence from comparable municipalities show that once homes are metered, water use typically declines, especially during the summer months when the system pressures are at their highest. So several scenarios through the business case were evaluated, ranging from maintaining the status quo to a full universal metering rollout. And the conclusions are fairly clear. Doing nothing offers no conservation benefit and leaves inequities unresolved. Metering only new construction has minimal impact because existing homes in our community are driving our demand. And voluntary programs, while they often provide great and early benefit, that only applies if high-use customers actually participate. And while universal metering as a whole delivers the strongest long-term outcomes, it also carries the greatest short-term delivery and financial risk to the community. So the question becomes less of should we meter and more of how do we do it responsibly? The upcoming reports will also confirm that the most significant gap in our current system is the measurement of single residential properties. This limits visibility into consumption and it constrains both demand management and long-term planning, both from an infrastructure perspective in a municipal forum, but also at a regional level. From a financial perspective, the work will demonstrate that the lack of measurement has a direct financial and equity implication. And the analysis will validate that flat rate billing weakens cost alignment within the utility and contributes to an ongoing cross subsidy, reducing transparency and long-term financial resilience. Importantly, the forthcoming reports will strengthen and validate what staff and council have already observed. However, it will be done using modeling, comparative evidence, financial analysis, and confirm that these issues are structural rather than temporary. And finally, the work will establish that there's no neutral path forward. Maintaining the status quo will be shown to carry an operational and financial risk, while acting too quickly introduces delivery risk. This is why these reports are presented and structured in a sequenced and deliberate way to set decisions in front of council for their consideration. Within that decision framework, 3 implementation pathways will be presented. A phased and balanced approach, prioritizing meter-ready homes, new construction, and voluntary participation. A defined universal rollout program delivered in a multi-year capital initiative. And an incremental approach, focused on new construction and voluntary participation only. Each pathway advances conservation, equity, and sustainability, but with different trade-offs, both in pace, in certainty, and financial exposure. In closing, universal metering is not a simple technical exercise. It represents a modernization on how we manage one of our most essential public services. It advances conservation, it improves equity, it strengthens financial sustainability, and supports climate resilience, all priorities council has previously endorsed. The forthcoming reports are about establishing direction, not about shutting off the taps. The reports will take a deep dive into the business case. Staff will float sustainable financial options and provide a navigable implementation pathway, one step at a time. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions today.
Excellent. Thanks for the great report. Glad to see things moving forward, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the report. I think at the council level, we've been contemplating this for it's a very long time, a decade maybe, and it seemed overwhelming when we got started. So it's great that you've got us to this place. My gut feeling is that, the hugest pressure and piece that doesn't really, isn't the same now as it was 10 or 20 years ago is climate change and global warming. I mean, the pressures on people's gardens and lawns is so different than it was 20 years ago when we didn't have 2 months worth of blazing heat. So, yeah, we're at the point now where it obviously makes a lot of sense to spend this kind of money. So, yeah, I really appreciate it, and just wanted to move receipt.
Thanks for that. Thanks. And what I maybe might add to that, so I do recall these conversations back in early 2015, and the cost at that point was I think around $15 million. So to see that there is that price escalation for, and it's not that this is inaction, but like while we've been preparing the data, that number has increased, and maybe it was just potentially even just not a great estimate to begin with, because I don't know how much energy had gone to it, but. One of the big things on the climate change thing, just because I had to do an interview with CPC today, is we're sitting right now at 39% of our normal snowpack right today. And so climate change is definitely something that is absolutely impactful. With that, I'll pass it over to Councillor McCall.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. It's great to see this coming to the council table. It's of course, something that we've been discussing and trying to figure out the best approach to moving it forward while ensuring that, as you said, we don't overwhelm our resources in trying to make this change. I mean, this chart that we have up on the screen here really spells it out that, I mean, we're just seeing larger and larger increases in our water use. And the fact of the matter is that and you did highlight this in your presentation as well, that people that are trying to conserve water and use water responsibly are subsidizing the use of others who would like to have green lawns and often maybe don't realize that there's water being wasted if they have leaks in their system that they're not aware of. So I guess my first question is, I mean, we haven't landed on exactly how this is going to roll out, but I mean, we do have a sense of some options and how much leak detection can be achieved through what we're looking to do with a kind of staggered approach. Because it's my understanding that leak detection works a lot better when all the connections are metered. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. Thank you. Through the mayor to Councilor McCollum. Leak detection, really twofold, right? One, in terms of operational readiness for leak detection, we have leak detection equipment and we provide a leak detection program for the city on a 5-year rotational basis across the platform. So we are actively, that's part of our routine work. Where we really get into the details in terms of leak detection through universal metering or a metering program is where we have the opportunity now to leapfrog technologies. We're into a place where meters are smart enough to identify there's a leak and communicate that there's a leak. And they do that by low flow event timing. So overnight, you'll still see flow through the meter. It will alert not only us as a utility, but potentially as far as alerting the homeowner if they would sign up through an active account. So the more meters we have in, the more leak detection could occur, the better information we could have, and the more proactive we can be with communicating with the residents with respect to that.
And then the other question I had is just operationally, like how complicated is it for us to have, you know, some home, because I assume that as this rolls out, we're going to have people on the old system and people on the new system, which means that some folks will receive water bills and other folks will still get it annually, or are we going to bill everyone quarterly for water, whether they're, this is something I was wondering about after our last discussion on this. And yeah, it's just yeah, it seems like it could cause some confusion in the public. So I'm just wondering what our thoughts are on that.
Yes, it's a great question. Again, thank you for that. I think our team in finance has some similar questions in terms of how quickly this could be rolled out, what a rollout look like, and how do we educate the community in terms of how we're transitioning, or when and if we do decide to transition. I will offer that the financial strategy doesn't contemplate a deep dive into that particular item. It notes definitely in terms of having to build a new rate structure, one that's equitable, comparable, and one that is transitional. as metering is deployed within our community, we want to still maintain some equitability between flat rate structures and metered structures, but we want to set upper limits within that. And you'll see some of that as we talk about the financial strategy on the forward. The impetus to a complete and rollout of billing right now is just financial structures. We're going through, I think this year, if not next year, a redo of our financial systems and our softwares, which will link our utility billings accounts. And so there's a lot of work to be done on that in terms of what will look like. And really, I think I'm not oversharing by suggesting that we're looking to seek to remove the water and sewer and solid waste from the taxation and get it into quarterly billing, so that even if you're paying a flat rate, you would still be paying on a quarterly basis. So whether you're paying volumetric or flat, the transition will move forward in a seamless fashion. So hopefully that answers your question.
That makes sense. That, yeah, all utilities will basically move to a different billing system. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks so much for the report. I did bone up before the presentation and watch the video of the information we received a while back, where you talked about the leaks and all the technology now to be able to detect, you know, almost in real time, whether you've got a leak or something. So there's lots of different options there, technology wise, depending on which way we want to go. I did used to live in a commercial residential building that had metered water, and it was all new in that circumstance, and it really wasn't a big deal at all. You know, my bills didn't seem that high until I got a leak, and my bill went way up, and it was great to be able to detect that and get that sorted out. Whereas if that had happened without metered water, I wouldn't have known that there was a leak in a toilet in my commercial space that was wasting a ton of water. I guess one question I have, well, sorry, just prior to that, a piece that was mentioned in the report, but not necessarily in your presentation, was another huge aspect of this is the stress on our infrastructure and why this is so important, because particularly in those summer months, there's a ton of stress on our existing infrastructure. So it's about conserving water, obviously, but it's also about that infrastructure piece. So wanted to make sure that was noted. In the report, it talked about that there are 2,500 meter ready residences currently. How many are non-metered? Non-meter ready out of residential? I don't know if I saw that in the report.
Roughly speaking, for ease of math and council, it's just over 9,000.
9,000, yeah.
Total. So 2,500 of the 9,000 are meter ready.
Okay, so we'd still have, so about a third of full out if we were to go with the meter ready.
I believe it's about 34% meter ready.
Yeah, okay. And then I guess just one plug I wanted to put in. I know Mr. Garbett has heard this from me before. I did do a resolution at the regional district, which came back and didn't really go anywhere, unfortunately, around water storage. And I guess for those, you know, as we move to water meters, obviously people who have gardens, which was mentioned, particularly food gardens and fruit trees and all of that, there are higher watering needs. And I would like to see us actually incentivize that in terms of perhaps subsidies for water storage, that kind of thing, because I think we should be encouraging people growing food for food security, as well as, you know, less stress on transporting food and all of that. I know that I just ate the last beets out of my garden, and I've actually not had to buy nearly as much produce this year because my garden produced so much last year. So I think that's an important thing to help have a little perk for people who are maybe using a bit more water and would like to you know, conserve that water storage. So I don't know if there's any comments about that, if that can be included in the
I'd love to
conversation.
respond if I may. Thank you, Councillor. It's a great thought. And I think really what comes to mind for me is just the consultation of the social economics that come through this when we talked about solid waste and the implementation of solid waste. There are needs that are outside the regular. SHMU, zoning, multi-generational housing, would all come to that. So if you have a single family home, but you have 3 generations of family living in it, obviously your water consumption is going to be higher. So I
Yeah.
think as we go through the rate structure build, that's the opportunity to have that consideration for those particular entities that are outside the norm, that fit within the values that we're trying to achieve within this format.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Garbutt?
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor, just to go to that. There are a number of municipalities across British Columbia, Canada, North America, dealing with the cost, mostly availability of water, but be in a proactive area where you require rainwater storage, you have rebates. And so I think some of this will develop. I would say that adding additional regulatory requirements to development approvals is not a big fan now with the province. However, there's a real practical reason to have that. It saves money for people. There's a whole bunch of aspects to it. So my personal experience with having development permit areas or building requirements that have either these kind of options is something we should definitely be exploring. I would suggest that's adjacent to the generalized topic, but it's important to keep their eyes on. And I think unfortunately in our region, I would say small R region, because we have a gigantic lake that has a bunch of water coming out of it, I think the perception is not as dire as in some areas. But I can tell you 30 minutes south of here, there was an area that actually ran out of water on 2 municipal areas and had significant development impact. So keeping your eye on that is great.
Thanks, Mr. Garbutt.
If I may just add to that as well, Councilor Moran talked briefly about infrastructure and the weight that demand has on infrastructure. Staff were quite open in sharing this with the CBRD, the regional district staff, and the water side. One, to be transparent in our processes, and also it's nice to have an educated eye to kind of scrutinize the work that we've done and ask us really tough questions before we got here to council, which was really fun. So I appreciate Chris LaRose providing a context and an opportunity for us to bounce things. But some of the great work and discussions that came out of that sharing was understanding that the CBRD is currently undertaking the Water Master Plan update. And so they're contemplating what our current projections look like for water consumption as to what that will cost in capital. And you talked about storage, you talk about pipe sizes, you talk about all of those things could be impacted. Those are savings that we have not yet realized as a result of not transitioning. And there's a potential to push those out longer, which could save significant capital dollars in the long run. And one item that I hadn't even contemplated because it wasn't on my radar that Chris brought forward was licensing, as Mr. Garbutt just talked about. The water license isn't unlimited at the lake. And so by conserving now and reducing our consumption, we can extend that license agreement potentially 10 or 20 years out before renewal is required. So those are big conversations beyond just the intimacy of a meter in someone's house.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's front of mind for Fraser Lake right now, who had massive fires, having enough water for fire flows. And although it's not in the summertime, as we've seen just south of us, forest fires are something that need to be contemplated as well. So when we're talking about, it's not just about being able to water our lawns or whatever, it's about like if we have a catastrophic incident happen, that we have the fire flows to deal with it. So the infrastructure is so critical. Councillor Healy.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to speak briefly to the politics of water meters. When I first ran in the 2009 by-election, water meters was actually the big issue. And the candidate who was expected to win was running on an anti-water metering platform. My position was considerably more nuanced, and we saw how that turned out. But part of the rationale back then for not implementing metering was that Courtenay residents were actually doing a pretty good job of water conservation. And I think what we've seen from our report tonight is that that's changed over the years. And so far from people rallying against metering, we're actually having people getting in touch with us advocating metering, as we're also hearing about from our colleagues in other communities. I don't think we should lose sight of the politics of this, particularly in an election year, but I think the approach that's being suggested by staff makes a lot of sense. And I think the equity issue is one that is of particular relevance, where, you know, those who are conserving are currently paying the same rates as those who are not. So just a few comments to add to the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks again. I just wanted to get your opinion on leakage versus lawn watering. I mean, we saw a population growth of 15% in this period that you presented us. But water has grown 40%. So do we even know what our leakage rate is? Do we have any concept of that? I think on average on other municipalities, it could be 10 or 15%, but could it be worse? Could this really be just a leakage issue, or is it more than likely that it's a lawn watering issue?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it is more or less a lawn watering issue in terms of consumption and pressures and stresses on the systems, as you can see by the sheer amount of water that's being consumed. Leaks don't get to choose what time of year. And so if a leak is consistent, a leak would be consistent in January. You can see that our off months are fairly comparable, and they're growing more so with population and less so with seasonal water use. Those spikes in the graph are the seasonal water use, which were quite extensive and well above a 2-factor of seasonal demand. More generally, though, in terms of leaks, obviously, you're correct. Most BC municipalities that are unmetered have a leak loss rate of around 12 to 15, upwards of 17%. We've done quite a good job operationally to understand what our leaks are, and we are in the 7 to 10% is what we estimate. The unfortunate part about loss is it's attributed to everyone because we don't have meters.
Okay, well, thanks for the clarification that we're really talking about keeping our lawns green during droughts. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I was shocked by my first year as chair of the water committee is when we actually instituted the water restriction at that time of year. The expectation is water usage goes down, but it seemed to make people go, I must water my thing for the maximum amount of time possible, rather than what would be the right amount. And so I think there's a huge education opportunity still for around that item. With that, I'll pass it over to Councillor Schulker.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the hard work on this. And it's laid down the groundwork, I think, for the community to understand why we're having this conversation now. And I appreciate the staged approach. My question around the decision framework and implementation pathways is around timeline and how you see this coming to council and over what time frame. And what do you see as the key kind of decision points throughout? Like today's is just for us, asking us just to receive the business case. But there are obviously some major decisions. You've highlighted them in your presentation. And so kind of curious at what point you would like to come back and ask for those decisions.
That's a great question. Thank you. Through the Mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. Staff have been working on this project quite extensively over the last several months. And to be honest, I had written most of the staff reports, the 3 staff reports to date, and realized that they were very robust and probably needed to be prefaced a little bit with an executive summary. So they're prepared and ready, and we anticipate bringing those reports in March. I'm contemplating bringing this, and I'm happy to take direction, but I'm contemplating bringing all 3 at one council. They read consecutively. Once you make a strategic direction choice through the pathways, the successionary reports will guide you through that same pathway of choice through resolution. So we could get through them quite easily. I suspect there'll be quite a bit of dialogue as we go through. They're heavy reads, I'll be honest. There's probably 30+ pages of staff report plus the consultant reports to go through. So when you do get them in your agenda package, please get a coffee and a snack and a warm blanket and have a seat. That takes some time to go through. But yeah, I'm happy to go through them in detail on the council date. I'll have a presentation to go through, and we'll have a very fulsome discussion on each of the areas. And again, the first one being strategic direction, council deciding which direction they want to go with respect to implementation through the pathways. The second one is the financial strategy that that suits that. And the third is implementation timelines. And they all differ based on what direction council wants to go in terms of how soon, how late, and how broad the program could be.
All right, thanks for that. Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, just one final question here on just the financial implications. Back when we did the budget, I saw in the water capital plan that there's money allocated to water metering. But then when I saw this report, I thought, oh, we haven't really like landed on this. And then when I went back and looked, it actually said specifically ICI metering. And I realized that, I maybe had assumed we were talking about something else when I had read that line item. So, and I see that it is carried into, we have funds set aside for that into the capital plan, not just for this year, but for the next, and I think maybe even in 2028. So I'm wondering, are some of those funds going to be available for implementation, or are we going to have to look for additional funding within our water utility? And maybe this is a question that will be answered in your subsequent report, so maybe you don't need to answer it today, but just wanted clarity that what that line item in the capital plan currently means and whether or not that could change.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for that. Through the mayor to Councilor McCollum. So the answer to that is really pointed at ICI. The capital plan has been contemplated with the dollar value for capital investment to complete the unmetered ICI customers. So get them into a metered format. So that, as far as staff are projecting to be the status quo, it's our bylaw. ICI should be metered. We're making a distinct effort to finish ICI so that when the conversation comes for residential, it's its own isolated discussion. It in turn will help reshape and reform that inconsistency in terms of metered and unmetered customers in terms of volumetric amounts. And so hopefully those will be satisfied, but really want to separate the two, finish ICI and then focus solely on residential.
Thanks so much. Well, and I guess today's agenda with 1,400 pages is helping prepare us for these large agenda items coming forward to us. But we have this moved and seconded, so I'll just receive this if there's no further questions from council. And it's been a great dialogue. Thanks so much for setting this up. Hopefully this gets us set up for success. It definitely feels that way. Thank you. With that, we have Safe and Active Schools Program Engagement and Preliminary Results. Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, through the council. Matt Brown, our Manager of Transportation Services, is going to give an overview of this. I just would say this has been a long-standing, very productive partnership with School District 71. And setting this up, we had shared with my counterpart at the school district the information as this matter came up in our engagement that we have with School District 71's trustees.
Excellent. Thanks so much. You're on. Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, through to council. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Matt Brown. I'm the Transportation Services Manager for City of Courtenay. I'm just waiting for my slides to pop up and jump right into it. So. Oh,
you might be. Yeah, you're good to go. Yeah.
My first time. So
first time. It's all good.
Yeah.
We give you one chance.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So to introduce I just wanted to first acknowledge there's a lot of really good work from my staff, from a lot of staff across the city, from our leadership and School District 71 in establishing this. And also we've been working with our consultant Urban Systems on this program throughout. So a lot of really good work, and I'm very honored to be presenting this on their behalf. So the Safe and Active School program was launched with SE 71, and its aim is to improve safety for students traveling to school, and also increase the number of students traveling to school. It's supported by citywide goals such as the official community plan, the downtown revitalization plan, and the strategic transportation plan. So when we started looking at the Safe and Active School program about a year ago, we wanted to really establish two metrics, like being a quantitative, so some analysis on it, measuring success long-term, and qualitative, so understanding the impacts, how it is to the community holistically and how people feel about it. So I'm going to highlight some of those throughout this presentation today. So over the coming months, we'll be finalizing some of our safe and active school programs. We've been doing lots of engagement to date, and hopefully that engagement will help lead us to our plan moving forward. We've been collaborating with students, administrators, and families, and we've identified some barriers around safe and active school travel. We're going to have some proposed action plans and some budgets associated with that as well. So what are some of the benefits to help safe and active school programs? There's academic performance, there's environmental impact, the overall health and well-being of students, community equity, so everyone's getting to school safely, and then holistically traffic safety. So some of these examples, when I was even on site walking with some of the students, I was walking through Puntledge Elementary area and actually seeing the salmon, the streams and stuff. So very beautiful. Like that walking to school really increases academic and awareness of your community. So Urban Systems, our consultant, has been looking at across the country. They're working with safe and active schools for different communities across the country, and we've established what are called the 6 E's of active school travel. The first is engineering solutions, so enhancing crosswalk, bike lanes, traffic calming. The second is education, so promoting the program and teaching children about safe and active school training. Another part is encouragement, so promoting active school as it kind of ties in with education, enforcement as well. So traffic laws around the schools for drivers, and kind of evaluating the program long term and some of the improvements we implement. And finally, equity for all families. So when we started looking at the program back in the spring of last year, we wanted to have there's ultimately 6 schools across the district we were looking at. We had to evaluate a criteria on picking just 3 of them. They all had really good measures and potential for it, but we just picked 3. We looked geographically across the city, make sure we had balance that way. We also looked at service requests from residents calling in with concerns around school safety, and also incident data. So those were some of the analysis we decided to establish. The first 3 schools being Puntledge Park Elementary, Courtenay Elementary, and Valley View Elementary. So today I'm going to present a little bit about our engagement results. We'll be looking at long-term and try to move the needle and get better information on how safe and active schools programs investments result. So for road safety, you can see here from some of the surveys we put out there, which was approximately 600 results we got back. When we asked about the current road safety state around those schools, the net promoter score, which a lot of us have seen historically, was negative 52.4%. So not great, but really an opportunity for us to get better. When asked about the level of comfort, so sending your children to school or walking around, getting to school, again, not a great score, negative 5.2, but again, an opportunity for us to improve. Finally, what I thought was really important was when we asked, is it worthwhile investment of staff resources and time? We got a much better score of a 26.3%. So really highlighting that point that with this effort, we can improve things. So early works, something that was really important to our entire team when we were starting our walkabouts with the students is we wanted to establish something quickly and meaningful to the community to kind of build that trust right off the groundworks. So some of the early works we established were RFP, so a rapid flasher program. At headquarters in Shutnick Drive, we implemented one there, leading into Vanier Secondary. At Fitzgerald and 10th Street at Courtenay Elementary, it also implemented a rapid flasher program in there. And then Malahat and Brooks Place, it's kind of servicing Isfield and Valley View schools. So those 3 RFB crosswalks installed. Moving on to our safe and active school program. So in the fall of last year, we worked with lots of stakeholders that we're early engaging with, and we said, well, why don't we establish a back to school program, return to school, which has historically been done, but just again, enhancing that even further with what's going on. So we talked about our back to school driving awareness. We deployed some speed readers. We early on in kind of July, we looked at our infrastructure around those schools and make sure that all the crosswalks are painted, vegetation was trimmed, and our flashing beacons had their maintenance. We also worked with the RCMP on education and enforcement initiatives. So they did increase patrols during peak times and had a positive reinforcement program. back in the fall and winter, when we were doing the walkabouts with the children, especially along Lurik, we were hearing that children weren't getting across the street fast enough in the current timing. So our team kind of took that away, and we decided we'd upgrade the cabinets in those corridors. So being at Idians and Malahat, so that's basically the brains of the intersection, and put in what's called a leading pedestrian interval. What it does is increase the crossing time for those children. And furthermore, all of the lights go red for 5 seconds to allow those children that safe space to get across that road. So task plan for 2026, some of our upcoming initiatives, we're excited to say we're going to be looking at some what are called pavement torch down methods for school symbols. So everyone's very familiar with the school symbol as you enter a school, but these are actually on the asphalt, very large. As you can see here, some of them are up to 10 feet long. So it's going to be the school symbol along with the school text, just raising that awareness when you're entering that school zone. It's been proven across North America to increase road safety. Again, as I spoke earlier, upcoming initiatives, long-term planning out our 5, 10, 15-year recommendations and improvements for the corridors. We're reviewing all the 589 comments we received, providing preliminary recommendations. And we're also hosting an open house on March 12th. We're going to be reviewing some of those early results with the community and having a survey of those improvements we're looking at. And finally, coming back to council again with some of those recommendations and some of the engagement feedback we received on some of those improvements. So I want to thank you for your time and open any questions.
Excellent. Thanks so much. A great report and great presentation. And I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Obviously, I'm really excited to see this moving ahead. I mean, it's something we've been talking about at council for a very long time is, how do we get people using active transportation? And we always come back to kids because we figure they're the most malleable and adaptable. And I have 3 kids, and I've found that some of them are really good at getting to school in ways other than be driving them, and others are not. And they've had like fairly similar upbringings, but there are some significant differences. And I think what I've come to realize is like we have a really great system of sidewalks, crosswalks now, especially crosswalks because of all the work the city's done. Bike lanes everywhere. It seems like there's lots of awareness of drivers about kids using the roads. So it seems to me the biggest thing keeping kids back from actually going to school by walking or riding a bike or taking the bus is more like fear-based stuff. It's like, is my kid safe? Can I allow them to go? And I think that's really what's holding it back is this whole cultural idea that there's a big risk to allowing your child to go to school. And I guess I wonder how much energy we can put into that sort of education about like, this is a really great thing for your kids. And this is really, in fact, really safe. I think the chance of having your kid go out and missing by being abducted is like 1 in a million. There's so many other things that we do with our kids that are actually so much more dangerous, but yet it's the first thing probably parents think about. And so, some messaging around how wonderful it is for your kids. I mean, you brought up independence in the report, and I think that's one of the greatest things it does for our society is it builds that independence in people and the belief that they can actually do something on their own. So at a young age, I think that can really play out in later years. So thanks for the report, and I look forward to supporting the recommendations.
Thank you.
And if you have any thoughts on that, you're welcome to add.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Frisch, it's a great point. And that's where we talked about the quantitative versus qualitative. I really understand like how people are feeling about sending their children, and consistently for all the survey results, we saw that people felt there needs to be more education and awareness about how safe, and there's different routes that you can take to safely get there. Is it through a buddy system with older students, things like that? So it's definitely, definitely aware of it, and some of our recommendations will reflect that.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks so much for this report and for the work that's being done here. It's really impressive, and I think puts some numbers to some of the assumptions many of us have had. I agree with Councillor Frisch, and that I think often it's parental concern about the safety of their children. And I know that from knocking on doors during the last 2 elections, that was one of the single most singular points of agreement I would have with people I was talking to about transportation was that it'd be great if kids had the option to walk safely to school. And usually the conversation would turn to parents being concerned, perhaps unduly. And I think the parental concern comes in so clearly with the net promoter of -52. Clearly, parents are concerned. Until you solve that problem, you can have education is one of the 6 E's, I believe. So we're on it in terms of solving that. I just wanted to make those general comments, but I also had one question for clarification, and that was thought it was a really clever idea, the Hands Up survey of getting over 2,900 responses by asking kids. And I was curious, was it just a single question? How did you get to school today? Or I was just curious if there were any, given how much data was provided there, if there were any other questions that were asked, like how did you get to school last year, or how did you get to school last week, things like that.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Wilco Hamilton, thank you for that question. There was a variety of questions, but we also had to kind of keep them in context. There were children were asking questions, so we had to kind of keep that animated too. So, but I could further follow up some, if you want to see some of those results, I could follow up with you on that.
You don't happen to know what the other questions were?
I know off the top of my head, there's they trying to frame it around how we ask our questions about where you're from, how did you get here today, how many people in your family, a lot of those questions. And then we try to massage the questions around the student and the environment. So those are just some of the questions, like what keeps you from biking to school, and try to like those pieces to get there. So we try to balance it for the audience. So
when given the ingenious way the data was collected and like the rich source, like it's a huge number to be able to get results from that many people. Anyway, if you're able to share with council what the questions and answers were, I'd be very interested in taking a look.
Yeah, absolutely. We had to tailor it, like I said, to the students versus the parents. Yeah, I can follow up further in that if you'd like, for sure. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton and Councillor McCall.
Yeah, I'll also want to repeat how great it is to see this work advancing, and yeah, just one of those times that there's something really tangible to support and look forward to that incremental advancement on a project like this, because of course it's not the work's not done after one go round, and hopefully this is supported into the future and becomes integrated into the planning and work that we do in our community. One comment or additional benefit that I wanted to flag that isn't in that slide that you shared, but it's certainly connected to all those benefits that were listed, is community connection. I don't think I ever felt more connected to my neighborhood than when my kids were young and I walked them to school. I was thinking about how successful the neighborhood community was, or both my children went to Punledge, and very few parents in my neighborhood drove their kids to school, and walking was very well established, and biking, and parents were fairly, I would say, like the parents that I knew were fairly comfortable with the children's safety, at least from the direction that I came from. But something that I saw over my time there as a parent was a real support by the school in encouraging that behavior and really highlighting, like you said, the health and well-being and how it helps academic performance. But something that the school took on, and I believe it was actually the idea of the PAC at the time, was doing a day a week where they close the parking lot, which as far as I can tell, they still do, because some days I go past there and all the staff vehicles are out on the road. I mean, not that it would need to look the same, but I do wonder if there is the opportunity in like engaging with the school group that there could be some presentation of these ideas, because parents become much more comfortable with the idea of allowing their kids to walk and ride to school if there's a day where it's practiced. And, you know, Punledge School is a French school in which a lot of kids are driven. And on that day, the parents park farther away in order to have that experience of walking and riding their bikes. So even parents who aren't even in the vicinity for active travel participate in that. And the kids do experience, have the experience of what it's like to arrive at school without jumping out of a car and walking into the school doors. So I think there is a real opportunity for other schools to embrace that. I truly witnessed a change in school culture when that was implemented. And I mean, clearly there's a recognition of success in that, because I think we're on the fourth school principal that supported that at that school. I mean, that was probably 13 years ago that those Walkie Wheelie Wednesdays started. So yeah, it'd be great to see other schools take that on in some way. Maybe not exactly the same, but yeah. So I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Councilor McCollum. And I can say, because I helped get it going at Valley View Elementary, same Wacky Wheelie Wednesday. And it was great to see that happening. And then now when I'm doing my other job, driving school bus, I can say that there are a number of schools that have, and it's usually a Wednesday, but there's that Wacky Wheelie Wednesday kind of thing. But I definitely think it's a great message to say, like, this is definitely something that all schools should be doing if they're not, for sure. So thanks so much for those comments. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I certainly agree that this is some of the more important work that we've done. And I think it's significant that the report acknowledges a positive view in the school community and among parents of the city's leadership in this area. I did wonder if the work that's been done at Arden, which isn't mentioned in the report, but whether we've got any data coming back from there in terms of increased numbers of kids using active travel to get to school, just given some of the measures that have been taken to try and make the street and the approaches a little safer in that neighborhood.
Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian. At this point, we haven't started measuring at our end, so but something we will look at in the future. Yeah, thank you.
And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks again, Mayor. I just wanted to pick up on a great point that Councillor McCollum had made about, parents driving their kids partway to school. And I don't know if you explored that in your work, but, saving a trip across a bridge can make a big difference for a parent if they're coming from far away. And I've also noticed that, if you don't feel like your younger student or younger kid can make it all the way, you can certainly drive them part way and find a place to walk in the rest or meet up with friends and such. So I guess I'm just getting back to that educational piece of how do we get people to understand the systems to make it all work. And is that something that you'll be coming back with, hopefully?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Fisk, that's a great point. There's pieces even early on that we're looking at for infrastructure when we're designing it. Is it appropriate for them to be dropping off right at the school, or do they walk partway through? So to answer your question, yes, we're looking at parts of that for sure.
That's great. Yeah. And I always bring up this idea of putting videos on social media. I don't know how expensive that is, but it's something we could consider. It'd be great.
I'll take that away. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I guess we're going to move for seat in a second, but I just think of one other kind of benefit that's maybe not spelled out in the report nor in the slides, and that is there were some traffic studies done on the 5th Street Bridge a few years ago, and they showed the peak of traffic is matched with school bell times, not with the beginning and end of work days. And I think it's probably worth people who don't have children noting that there's a benefit to them as well. This helps to keep our traffic moving more, safely and freely on our streets, reduces, pressure on the bridges at peak times. So among all the other benefits that were spelled out, it's probably worth thinking that there are others which affect people, even if they're not part of a school community. So I think there's something here for pretty much everyone to appreciate. So thanks for the work, and I'll move proceed.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And I would say one other interesting thing that I would say, and we just received an email about this recently, and it's come up and something that we can see in our communities even prior to school. Many of the daycares have the kids out walking around in like walking buses or various things. And again, I think it's and I think the impetus from council as well is like, making sure that, again, it's safe for everybody that's out there. And if we're getting them started that young, it's just that much more comfortable for them as they enter into the school system. So Thanks again. With that, I think unanimously accept that from council and appreciate all the discussion. And we'll move into the amenity cost charges assist factor at 5 and 10%. And I'll pass to Ms. O'Connell.
Thanks very much. So council, this evening you've got a briefing note, and this is a direct follow-up from the direction provided by yourselves at the January 14th meeting regarding the proposed amenity cost charges bylaw number 3207. At that meeting, you'll recall that council had given the bylaws first and second reading, deferring consideration of third reading until after receipt of additional information on the cost implications and feasibility of introducing grace periods, as well as a higher municipal assist factor of 5 and 10% for a period of up to 2 years. First, I'd like to briefly revisit the core principles behind the bylaw. As our city grows, we face the fundamental challenge of how to fund the amenities that maintain and enhance our community's quality of life. Amenities like community centers, libraries, and recreation facilities. ACCs are a modern and transparent financial tool designed for precisely this purpose. They work by linking the cost of new amenities directly to the development that creates the demand for them. This model is crucial for reducing the financial burden on our existing taxpayers. This isn't just a theoretical benefit. The feedback from our residents is clear. The recent resident satisfaction survey highlighted a growing concern about value for tax dollars and a decreasing tolerance for tax increases. The ACC framework directly addresses this by ensuring that growth helps pay for the impacts of growth. Of course, we must also balance this with the realities of the development market. We have received correspondence from some in the development industry expressing concern that the cumulative costs of these new charges, when added to existing DCCs, may be prohibitive. We recognize them as partners in building our city, and we take their feedback very seriously as well. It's important to state, however, that these are fundamentally competing interests. We expect that any new costs will face opposition from the development community, just as we would expect taxpayers to oppose subsidizing the cost of growth. The financial impacts of phasing in the ACC rates and the impacts of adjusting the municipal assist factor to potentially 5 and 10% are outlined in the report and more fully explored in the attached memo prepared by Nancy Henderson from Urban Systems. Council will note that as direction has already been provided on the municipal assist factor and the ACC program implementation approach, this information is provided for information purposes only. With that, Nancy and I are happy to answer any questions that council may have in regards to the information as presented.
Councillor Schulaker.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. I thought it was really helpful to break it down and to also review how we got here. I guess my first set of questions, Mayor, is actually around option 4 listed in the staff report around the reduction of the ACC project list. And going back to the ACC project list, there are a few items there that we, in this financial plan that we're considering today, are actually, we have included, particularly 2 of the short-term projects, one being the pickleball courts and the other being dog parks. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand if we have included in the financial plan for those projects to move forward through taxation, and yet they're on the ACC project list. Yeah, I'm a little confused how those things are tied together.
All right.
I'm just catching up on the looking at the reattachment. Okay, so in regard to the pickleball courts, if you go into the attachment, which is the staff report from the December 10th, 2025, that's the staff report that outlined them. The pickleball courts, the cost estimate for 2024, it included $600,000, the benefit being calculated at 30%, the benefit attributed to growth at 180 with the assist factor. So the total municipal cost is still 421,800. One of the nice things with the ACCs is they're in the financial plan in the or the pickleball courts are in the plan because this has not been adopted by council yet. So it's not reflected within the plan currently. So that we can't include these contributions as being removed from the budget until we have authorization through the bylaw in order to start collecting these costs.
Yeah, so as a follow-up, if I can, the financial plan has both of these items as full tax funded, which will be potentially approved today. And this will be retroactive. I'm not quite clear why we would both tax the public fully for the costs while also potentially recuperating ACCs if there are developments that move forward if this ACC bylaw passes.
And I think what I heard before is that if the ACC and DCCs pass as they were originally presented, that would actually drive down the taxation amount, but I'll let somebody much smarter than me, Mr. Legemeyer.
Good series of questions. Nice to be here once again. So the two projects in question have been important to this council, so they've been included in the financial plan. Council did not make any decisions to remove those projects. Therefore, they're included. The projects are good ones to be included in the ACC bylaw. Like was said, I cannot use ACC funding to fund these projects until we have an adopted bylaw. An item that we could do if council so chooses, when you adopt the financial plan using taxation to fund these two projects, council could pass a motion and say, don't proceed on these projects until we have the ACC bylaw in place. That could be an option to protect it, but then it would delay these projects from getting done. And that is up to council.
I have one more follow-up. Is another option just removing these two from the ACC list? Because we've had the debate and dialogue already about these two items through the financial planning process. So with what impact would removing these two items from the ACC list have on our financial plan?
The removal of these two projects from the ACC list won't have an impact on the financial plan because there's no funding from ACCs towards them in the financial plan on the agenda today.
So really the impact is if it is on the ACC list, that drives down the taxation, the property tax increase. Same with DCCs. Do you have a follow-up or? Okay, Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Actually, I don't have a question. I was just going to make a comment. So maybe you should send it back to Councillor Jellicoe.
Sure. Councillor Jellicoe.
Yeah, thanks. And I really appreciate the articulation in the staff report around the challenging situation we are in around the growth of the community and the challenges that the development community face in the face of a declining market, specifically around building rental units in the community. One of the correspondents from some of our partners in the development community articulated some concerns around the financial modeling. And I was reminded of that comment that we received through correspondence, actually through the earlier staff report on the DVLAP, where staff articulate the importance of doing financial analysis as close to the adoption of a bylaw. And I think that was referencing the zoning bylaw. And so I guess my question is how confident is staff around the financial modeling that was done, given that we have quite a bit of criticism from the development community, specifically around the financial viability of projects in the face of increasing of these, both the DCCs and the ACCs, in this context, the ACCs.
Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Councillor. So I think I need to be very clear. We have professionals that are engaged. We're sharing opinions. Developers are sharing opinions. We have not, and we have a third-party consultant in urban systems that assess that. So I'm very concerned when there are statements about the professional reputation of people. And so our staff are relying on paid professional consultants that are leaders in their field, and there may be a difference of opinion. So I'm very concerned when there's some very So it's challenging to have feels accusatory that there's incompetency or competency question there. So I just want to be really clear that the work that our consultants have provided us is in our understanding in accordance with the best practices. And so if others are going to provide their opinion on that, I would wonder what and how that is shared in a professional manner. But having said that, the matter that we're dealing with has been looked at for a number of months. The market is significantly changing. One key item here is the pressure and market uptake that CFP Comox expansion is going to have. So our market has always been quite unique in Central Vancouver Island for a variety of factors. And we know that at a minimum, we're going to have very significant growth related to that. So some of the communities and experiences in British Columbia and Vancouver Island where we're seeing slowing, it may not be substantially the case. And we are already hearing in the South Island that Greater Victoria is continuing to be quite robust. So, those fears that somehow these will have negative impacts on a declining market, I would counter that with the uniqueness of our market and the impact that institutional industry that is now the leading focus, particularly on Vancouver Island, is going to be in light of declining other basic resource industries. So I guess I would just want to say that we have professional consultants that are helping us, and it's challenging when kind of have differences of opinion that are potentially questioning the role or competency.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And just as a follow-up, do we, just given your last remarks, do we still feel confident that the inputs into those calculations are accurate, accurately reflecting the current market?
Oops. Thank you through the mayor. Ultimately, our growth projections are based on our kind of big picture knowledge of the market. There are definitely going to be swings there, but the information that's becoming extremely evident with the growth of CFP Comox, that's going to be an important factor, in our regional market conditions. So yes, I feel confident in those projections, but projections are projections. And so, that the proof will be in what pressure is actually there in the market.
Ms. O'Connell.
I can speak to this one as well. So this issue was raised by another member of council on behalf of the development community at a previous meeting. And essentially, in the absence of evidence-based data to show otherwise, I have no reason to believe that the work that was performed, not by Nancy Henderson and Urban Systems, but by Kistix in support of this work, was done incorrectly. So there's no specific information that has been provided to myself that proves that there is any form of significant disconnect between the information that was considered by Kistix when they were undergoing the economic analysis that's required under the legislation prior to bringing this bylaw forward to council, that was done in a way that was not comprehensive or not appropriate as far as achieving that outcome of understanding the financial implications. It is absolutely not the intent of this program to eliminate or potentially do damage to the development industry, because as mentioned earlier, we absolutely recognize that the role that they play in building the homes within our community is absolutely critical for a variety of different reasons, ranging from access to housing, bringing on more market within the housing, as well as the economic benefit that comes from that development within our community. So as far as concerns regarding the level of analysis done and whether or not we can rely on that, I have no reason to believe why we wouldn't be able to rely on it, because it's actually in our interest to make sure that the development community is able to continue in their business model and continue to do that at a prolific rate as much as the market will bear.
Yeah, and I know there's several meetings with different groups of councillors and stuff with developers over the past month or two, specifically discussing DCCs and ACCs. And one of the things that really seemed to jump out as well is that there are things beyond the control of the municipality, like CMHC costs and stuff like that. And those are things that I offered that as elected officials, we can help advocate at senior levels of government if there are pinch points or costs that are being given to them either federally or provincially. So, Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. First of all, I wanted to thank staff and our consultants for what I thought was excellent work in these reports. I agree with what Councillor Jolliker said, that it was very clear. It was also extra work that came about as a result of questions that were being asked by the development community and our desire to perhaps soften the blow a bit. It's fairly clear to me from reading the reports and looking at the options that any softening of the blow for the developers, I think, is outweighed by the added complexity that this creates for administration by the city. And so my inclination is to support proceeding with the bylaw as currently written. I did want to ask, though, there was a recent city staff session with the development community and a presentation there related to moving forward, how we work to make things better. And I just wondered if staff wanted to highlight some of the points that were made to the developer group about how the city can actually in this current climate, work with a better orientation towards providing service and perhaps expediting the processing of development approvals and permitting and such. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hillian, for that wonderful setup. First, I just want to make a correction. It was City Square that did the economic analysis, not Acoustics. So I'm mixing up my DCCs and ACC work. But you're correct. I presented along with staff from the Development Services Department to the development community last Wednesday in Lower Native Sons Hall. This is part of a regular quarterly meeting that we're having with the development community. One, to provide updates on key milestones and projects. Two, to facilitate engagement with the development community on these issues and a variety of different issues that have an impact or will be impacting their industry areas. And at that presentation, as we're talking about the milestones when it comes to the OCP, zoning bylaw phase 1, zoning bylaw phase 2, and the DBLAP, I introduced a process that we're going to be undertaking internally within the department that's really looking at optimizing our internal processing, permitting, and other types of processes. So I had advised them that an RFQ had been issued. It really is a bit of an omnibus in the sense that it does cover more than one type of technology, but the largest one is in regard to development services area is the optimization of Tempest as a tool. So Tempest is our land use database system. It's a way that we can keep track of different permit applications and processes. At the same time, a lot of the processes, although they may initiate or originate within the development services department, they go beyond. So they may go into the engineering division, they may go into operations, they may go into rec and culture. It depends on what the application is. And whenever you have processes from end to end that kind of leave and come back, and there are different parties that are involved at various stages, there is always the opportunity to look at that process for options to increase efficiency. And so where we may be looking in these discussions around ACCs and DCCs of applying additional charges, the hope of the process that we're undertaking as an optimization process is to try and save money on the other end, which is time is money. So we heard from the development community repeatedly through various engagement that they want clear understanding of what the processes are. They want to know from point A to point B how long that's going to take and be able to rely on that timeline. As you can imagine, they're carrying mortgages, they're carrying deposit costs, they have staff that they need to line up. So really taking a look at how can we potentially shift some of the financial burden from DCCs and ACCs or make it more palatable by saving the money on the other end. There's quite a bit of interest in that and a lot of excitement around the potential of seeing the machine run in a more efficient way to the benefit of all of us. So that's the piece that Councillor Hillian is mentioning that I introduced, and council can expect a more fulsome report on what that program is going to look like, who is going to be involved, and what the timeline is. But I can let you know definitively that the implementation of the changes that are going to be required to Tempest and our other internal processes are an early deliverable within that bigger project scope. And really the priority and the emphasis is it communicated through that early deliverable expectation within the RFP and the RFQ.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that. And Councillor Jolicoeur. Oh, sorry, Councillor Frisch.
Oh, he wanted me to go first. I'll go first. Yeah, sounds good. All right. So I think, well, just a point of clarification. I asked this question last time. I just want to reaffirm that if there's a project on our ACC list and we decide not to do it, the portion of the monies we collected for that project stay in the fund and can be used for other projects in the fund. So, and I'm going to point out that we have like a rebuild on our outdoor pool in our ACC list, right? $32 million. I don't know how big of a limit is to walk out on and say, it's going to be tough to fund that puppy. I don't know if we're going to find other government agencies to jump in with us and help us. So it's going to be a tough sell. We do have an opportunity here to send a signal. And I get that 5 to 10% on each door is a small amount, $600. And that it leaves us in the negative over 2 years at under $200,000, which may seem like a lot of money, but if you think of the bigger picture, it's not really that much money. So, I'm inclined to say, I kind of wonder how much more work it is for staff to implement a phased-in approach. But in essence, giving the development community that signal, we do support them. We're not going to ditch the whole program or cut out a bunch of stuff, but I think going with option 2 would be a wise choice at this time. And I don't think it would actually be that burdensome on the bottom line for our ACC projects. And yeah, I don't really have any questions. If you want to comment on that, you're welcome to, but I did really appreciate the report and I thought it was well done. Thanks for that info.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. So the implementation question is kind of a two-parter. So one, if council, because we have already received the direction on the assist factor as well as on the program implementation. That's why this is a briefing note and not a report with recommendation options. So there's that piece. So if council does decide that you would like to direct staff to bring back a report that actually contemplates some of these changes as amendments to the current bylaw, that's kind of one part of it. The other one, and I believe the attached memo speaks to this a bit more, is really around the administrative processes of internally managing all of those in-stream components of it. So think of it this way: is anytime one thing changes, a new in-stream timeline starts. So our in-stream timelines, as an example right now, would be DCC inflationary rates, the regional district DCC. So those are already cycles that we're having to track within development services, coordinating with finance to make sure that the project that applied on such and such a date, where it is in all of those various in streams, in order to make sure that we're doing the formula calculation correctly for each of those individual projects. You add in a phased approach where that change is evolving, that just creates new in-stream timelines to then manage as well. So it's totally possible, but as we're going through the review of our technical systems to figure out how to manage these processes properly, in the absence of that being super robust and something that is plug and play, unless we get those systems really right, the more complexities that go in, the more likely we are to have accidental miscalculations, or one day can really make a difference as far as how much something is costing. And that does add an administrative and operational requirement or obligation to the city that isn't reflected within a cost recovery model. So you can imagine what that would look like. So I agree, and as outlined in the memo, the financial impact, it would likely be more of on principle or a signal as opposed to something more significant, but there would be financial impacts, but also operational impacts that we would have to consider how we dealt with that implementation to ensure accuracy, professionalism, and that we are collecting the right amounts for those projects based on the time they came and what applied to them at that time.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. And that's the one thing I hate is more red tape or more process unnecessary to getting stuff done. So it definitely causes some more thought. So thanks for that answer. I really appreciate that.
And Councillor Morin.
Thank you. Skipping the queue because I haven't spoken. Yeah, I think I really appreciate this report coming with laying out the details of what this would look like. And in the report, I think it shows about a $600 difference to go with the changing the assist factor for that 3-year period. And I guess just with what has been outlined by Ms. O'Connell in terms of the administrative piece of it, how does that, how does that weigh out in terms of that $600 savings probably evaporates if there's added work for our staff and as was mentioned, if there's other things sort of in the works to alleviate. I know there was discussion also about pre-zoning and other things. If there's other ways to alleviate costs, it seems like, yeah, just with what's being outlined, that the cost savings are not necessarily there. It definitely is stretching out the implementation and easing maybe that a bit, but I guess I'm just not seeing the cost benefit is not working out for me. So I'm inclined to go with the original approach that we talked about. Thank you.
And thanks, Councillor Morin and Councillor Schilliker.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm also inclined for option 2. I do get curious just with those last comments from Councillor Morin, because it was referenced in a previous staff report around ways to reduce the burden on developers and on growth, being the pre-zoning. And I don't know if we've actually visited that throughout this conversation again. And so is there direction that staff need, or is there something in the work plan that speaks to the pre-zoning work? Is that happening in the zoning bylaw that would support reduction in costs for developers through pre-zoning? And there was some language in one of the reports that spoke to that being one of potential mechanisms to support offsetting the costs related to increasing ACC charges.
I will have to get back to you on that one. I prepared quite a bit tonight, but that one I would need a moment to do some reading.
Right. Councillor Fish. Oh, actually, we have a pinch hitter here, Ms. Gother.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think there's like a dueling Nancy's here, might get up and stand up. I'll just have to recognize my own limitations in this particular report, but just maybe to kind of describe some of the framework of growth contribution policies more holistically. So when the province introduced the Bill 44 and all the housing legislation, and they mandated that governments pre-zone for 20 years of housing, part of it, so they were recognizing one of the key tools of securing community amenities was often through these site-by-site zoning negotiations, and many councillors here will remember going through those processes, and developers had frankly frustration with those processes as well, because a conversation had to develop over time. In the way the legislation, once all the tools are working together, as the ACCs are meant to replace that community amenity contribution piece, the number's known up front. When developers approaching, a land owner, they can take that into account in determining what they want to pay for that land, et cetera. Now, in our own example, the city of Courtenay, and probably most communities, we're all still transitioning these tools in. So this question around pre-zoning, our analysis in the summer showed that we technically, mathematically meet the province's definition of sufficient pre-zoning for housing. However, we still want to, this is a very old zoning bylaw. We want to actually look at it in the phase 2 of the zoning bylaw update in order to understand, is that housing actually in the locations that we want, of the forms that we want? And so there could still be the potential for pre-zoning, in which case that's zoning. They can come in and get, probably a development permit would be required, form and character, but proceeding to building permit quite rapidly, and no rezoning process, which we know can be very lengthy. So those are how those tools are meant to work together, and you will see in the OCP the intention is that the policies are to use them in a coordinated way. That way, I think you're grappling with some of these questions before seeing all the tools kind of interlocking all together. I don't know if there's anything more to add on that, but I hope that kind of helps situate that the cost benefit of the pre-zoning and the removal of the CACs over time and the replacement with ACCs.
Yeah, I'll jump into my questions. That's fine with you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess peripherally, I'm wondering if we're seeing some advances in the timelines for rezonings and building permits. Are we seeing that shrink down? I mean, we've all heard the odd story about things taking years to get through, which didn't seem reasonable at the time. And maybe not, certainly not always at the city's fault, but are we seeing things change in the building department with speed that things are able to go through?
Thank you for the question. In broad terms, I mean, I've been working in the department for 15 years. There's certainly a culture of working more efficiently through sometimes technology, sometimes procedural clarity, sometimes bylaw clarity. For instance, people don't need to, come to council for every single variance. They don't have to come to council for a zoning for a suite like they used to have to. They don't have to do public meetings for everything. Probably one of the main things we're encountering is the infrastructure being one of the key restrictions in the ability to move forward on some of the larger rezoning. So we actually have a lot of policy support to support the kind of development that a lot of the developers want to do. But then they encounter a restriction in the, it's water or it's sewer. Those are the kind of big ones. And so, yeah, it kind of gets right at the core of the question that is particularly, I mean, really DCCs, we're talking ACCs right now, but just recognizing that infrastructure is so critical to make sure we can build them. So I realize I kind of roundabout talked to you there about the answer, but I think, we're moving the tools along and the procedures internally to move those timelines as best we can. And sometimes there's just a physical constraint like infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks for the answer. And Mayor, thanks for the lenience. I know we're off topic.
Well, I think Ms. O'Connell's gonna add in a bit as well.
One of the pieces with the optimization work that's planned to be undertaken this year is really to put a finer point on where any types of barriers to development are actually taking place. So Nancy has mentioned some of the constraints regarding the availability of specific utilities that are required to support the development. At the same time, it can also be things like incomplete applications. It can be the time it takes to do referrals to third parties, whether it's environmental or provincial or so on and so forth. So by actually going through and tracking and using business analysts to look at where all those pieces are, we can really take a deeper focus on the parts that are within our realm of control to look at how the city can contribute to expediting our own internal processes and or making things clearer for those that we're referring things to. So hopefully we'll have a positive impact on their timelines as well. At the same time, we have had a lot of developers in anticipation of council's consideration of final adoption of ACCs and DCCs that have worked very diligently to get their applications in. More interest than I think I was initially anticipating. And a lot of it is related, or I believe to be related to, or in anticipation of the growth that is coming or known to be coming through CFB Comox. So we have not had a slowdown in the number of pre-application meetings, the submission of applications. At the same time, we do also, and I think council is very aware of this, I am in interim and acting. We have some critical vacancies within the department that I would not say have, of course, they've had an impact on some of those timelines. At the same time, I don't necessarily think that it is directly attributable to any kind of substantial change. And really what we're trying to do is just making sure that we're communicating more effectively, making sure that people, they're not sitting in the dark wondering what's happening and getting ahead of things. And you'll see that through the presentations at the developer meetings. You'll see that as we continue to update the portal site, engage Comox Valley for this as well. And that's the commitment to transparent processes and building that relationship and trust over time.
Right. Thanks very much for that. And Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe this briefing note is just for receipt. And I just wanted to add to my previous comments that I would hope that we wouldn't make a decision. I think this council is always trying to look for the best for everybody, and it's tough in this situation because we've had these two sets of feedback. But I guess just in terms of making a decision around based on optics, as I stated, it's $600. It's around $600. That would be $600 less for a low density lot. And I just don't think that the additional work equates to that. I think we could have unintended consequences in terms of maybe more costs to developers because of the additional administration piece. So I would like to see staff continue their focus on all these other tools, as Ms. Gothard mentioned, as well as the increased efficiencies, et cetera, rather than shifting gears. So I'm hoping that we can just vote on receipt and carry on. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, I guess, thanks, Mayor. Just in terms of my previous comments around the two projects on the list that we are already taxing for, and if we were to go with another option other than what's been approved at first and second, what would be the procedural way, and maybe looking to the corporate officer, since we're at second reading in a few items from here, is it, how would we potentially amend if that's just to understand what that process would look like?
And are you wanting to change the list or like remove things from the list or just, sorry? And you can
Yeah, I
give
mean,
your
I'd
mic
be
on.
looking for support to remove those specific two items, although they're two of the smaller items on that list. I do think that we are taxing for them already, so.
Mr. Garbutt.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry to I don't mean to insert myself in a political dialogue, but the list of ACC items was carefully prepared and weaned down to include projects. We have a significant number of projects that are ACC eligible, and part of the whole process to make sure it was reasonable in that we, at a staff level, we would recommend if you want to remove those items, we actually have other items that we would potentially want to add because they have their community benefit, their alignment with ACCs. I would, if council may recall, a huge amount of work was done in drafting our DCC list as well as our ACC list to be very cognizant of development impacts, costs, and the like. So I just would say we are in a bylaw process. We are committed to reviewing and updating items regularly, which is how that list gets prepared. So I would offer that. And I know that our director of our CCS and staff involved in the preparation of the ACC and DCCs may have some thoughts as that as well.
All right, I'm gonna maybe put Ms. Saunders on first.
Thank you. Through the Mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur, I just want to confirm, as I confirmed with Mr. Langmeyer, the funding sources for the two projects. So the dog parks, are funded by taxes. But the pickleball courts are funded 500,000 from the Park Amenity Reserve and 250,000 from the Growing Communities Fund. So because they're ACC, if they remain on the list and are ACC eligible, if we look at pickleball, we can fund the appropriate portion of pickleball from ACCs, which means those funds in the Park Amenity Reserve and the Growing Community Funds can be reallocated to other projects. If they're removed from the ACC project list and are not eligible for ACC, that means, of course, those funds in the Park Amenity Reserve and the Growing Community Funds have to stay at the pickleball project and can't be reallocated to other capital projects.
Ms. O'Connell.
I am going to pass it over to Nancy Henderson, but just something for council to be mindful of as well, or actually, and also the corporate officer in procedural guidance or advice, should council decide they like to consider an amendment, is that the calculation is not, would not automatically be updated within the bylaw based on a simple strikeout of a single item. So it would require recalculation and more work based on the work that was done behind the scenes. So that's just something to bring to the attention. And with that, Nancy Henderson, if you would like to make any other comments.
Staff have pretty much taken care of it. Really what we'll be looking at is a recalculation and then having to go back and do second as amended and then bring it forward to council again, because there will be a new rate. The two projects are fairly small, so I expect it will only be a minor reduction in the rate, but we would do that work and amend all the associated documents and then bring it back.
And maybe before you go away, just as a follow-up, so I mean, we're talking about smaller projects, but let's say a bigger project like an outdoor pool was removed because we don't know the funding source of it, potentially if other parties might be part of that. Would that just be, and nobody's talking about removing it today, but if there is funding from other sources, then those would be just part of that natural ACC update into the future?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that would happen. And I'm going to take culpability here on a typo essentially in the bylaw that I think can go as worded. But when we've been talking with staff and in all of council reports, we changed that outdoor pool to recreation center expansion. So that was more general flexibility should additional funding come from other sources or there was a shift in priorities, which was identified in all the reports in the ACC memo that's being provided to council.
Okay.
But I missed changing it in the bylaw. So if council was going to give third reading and you wanted to make that change, you could change the outdoor pool to recreation center expansion as outlined in all like the ACC program. Otherwise, we would take care of it at a future point in time when we do the 1-year annual inflationary adjustment and bring that back to council for consideration. But since it came up today, I just wanted to disclose that as I was reviewing the bylaw, I noticed that discrepancy.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I guess glad I asked the question for clarification. Councillor Firsch.
Yeah, thanks. Could you repeat that? What do staff prefer in terms of changing that discrepancy? They want it done now or they want to do it later?
Ms. O'Connell.
Well, we can absolutely do it now. That one would be an easy on the floor amendment to do, because essentially you're just amending the title of one of the items within the Schedule B. It doesn't require any kind of recalculation or additional work that's been done. One of the pieces, and this was something that myself and Ms. Henderson had talked about, was also like the inclusion of the flexibility around the community center expansion category as well. But to make it really explicitly clear and not have to potentially consider future amendments, council could consider an amendment to the item number 3, which is currently outdoor pool expansion under Schedule B, to include the language around the community, the recreation facility expansion as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Well, I'd support you getting something to Ms. Proton if you wanted to make that happen, and we could put off that for the next item for a little bit to make that happen. But otherwise, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for the common thorough conversation, the information you provided, and simply move receipt. Oh, did you guys move receipt already?
I think everybody was like, this is going to be a good discussion. So, yeah. Excellent. I think it's been a good discussion. We'll just receive this unanimously by council. We are at nearly 6:30, so we'll take our dinner break now. I would like to give, especially if we're going to give staff some tasks to do to be prepared for later on. I'd like to give us maybe a 30-minute break. It's been a long day, and we have a few more things going on. So, give everybody time to have their dinner. So. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in if you're watching this on YouTube. And we're just going to continue with item 7.11, amenity cost charges bylaw number 3207. And I will pass it over. Oh, Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'll move that council amend Schedule B amenity list of the amenity cost charges bylaw number 3207 by changing item 3 from outdoor pool expansion to recreation center expansion, and that council give third reading to the amenity cost charges bylaw number 3207 as amended.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All right, and motion passes. Oh, all those opposed? Councillor Jolicoeur is opposed. Thanks for that. So that's 7.1.1. And for first and second readings, we have official community plan bylaw 3206. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nancy Goddard, our Manager of Community and Sustainability Planning, is going to kick this off, and our consultant, Adam Mattinson from B&A Studios, is also going to assist with this presentation. This is really great work that was undertaken. Council's given us a lot of good work, and we've engaged with the community. This is where we're at updating the bylaw. So just gave you a little bit of time to get going. Nancy, over to you.
Great, thank you, Council. So it's a privilege for me to be presenting the recommended OCP bylaw amendments before you. I'd like just acknowledging that Adam Mattinson already introduced here, is just sitting right here to my left, and then and he'll be available for any questions after the presentation. And Kate O'Connell, acting director, will also assist in the implementation discussion of the presentation. It's not that long ago that the city dramatically revised its OCP to modernize it from its previous 2005 version. In 2022, many of the same members of Mayor and Council sitting here today approved OCP bylaw 3070, the one that exists today. Planning staff did not expect to be revisiting our OCP so soon after such a significant multi-year visioning and community consultation effort. But as we know, in 2024, new proactive planning and housing legislation was enacted, necessitating review of land designations and housing policies contained within OCPs to ensure they're sufficient to meet legislative requirements. The overarching finding that becomes evident as I walk through this presentation is that in its fundamentals, the existing OCP is a solid, visionary, and progressive foundation aligned with provincial direction on community growth, and that this review has affirmed it is serving Courtenay well. Having just concluded participation in the Comox Valley Regional Growth Strategy minor amendment review process, this is a similar finding to what we assessed about the RGS, that the foundations of growth management policy direction remain appropriate. And similar to the RGS amendment findings, this OCP review process emphasizes the need for more clear and integrated implementation efforts in order to support the needs of our community. All of this to say that staff do have some targeted amendments to the OCP with a recommendation to establish a clear implementation process in which P is continuously being used as a guide to guide the numerous other strategies in its programs and services the city provides, all within a regional provincial legislative framework, and that will be informed by community engagement that occurs through more predictable cycles of engagement and not only project-specific engagement. The presentation is structured into what's staying the same, what's changing, and the next steps. So in terms of what's staying the same, these are the broad categories. I suspect you probably had a chance to read them, so I'm not going to really emphasize them too much, but these are the elements that are remaining the same. In terms of what's changing, Part A, foundations. So a key driver of our community's change is population growth. And we can see clearly that since the 2022 OCP, which was based originally on 2016 census and resulting projections, that we have been growing since the census faster than we thought. So we can see the 2022 OCP estimated that we'd have about, well, 31,969,000, so 32,000 people by 2041. But BC Stats currently projects the Courtenay's population will be nearly 32,000 this year. So meaning that we are now at the population that we originally thought would take another 15 years to achieve. Now, projecting out, it's estimated there could be a little over 42,000 people in Courtenay by 2041, 5,000 more than originally expected. But as we know with population projections, they are best estimates based on available information and understanding about likelihood of certain population behaviors. So as we can see from these two OCPs, that it is a good practice to be continuously monitoring these projections as expressly included in the new legislation. So what this means for housing needs is by 2026, so this year is the required 5-year estimated interval since the last national census, 2021, that around 2,500 dwelling units are required and 8,350 by 2041. And corresponding to that lower OCP population projection that I had previously mentioned, the 2020 housing needs report, which is the one that predates the one we have now, 2024, it was estimated that fewer than half of these number of units would need to be required for a similar 5-year interval. And I just provide here a reminder that Courtenay's housing target order issued last September has a much lower target of 1,334 over a slightly different 5-year period there. And that is intentionally calibrated to be 75% of a community's housing need to account for the multi-factorials beyond a local government's control in the delivery of housing. We were talking a little bit about that earlier today. And for context on building activity, over 2,000 residential units have been constructed since 2020, which is double the amount of units that were projected in the 2020 housing report for that same period. So lots of different numbers. I promise that I won't be having so many numbers in the following slides. But people might be wondering, how is it that the population could be so different between the 2020 OCP and now, and yet the land use designations do not have to change much? And that's because in the 2022 OCP, it was intentionally designed to be very permissive and flexible in its growth potential within city boundaries, provided that the growth occurred within the primary and growth centers. And then since that time, though we have also had the enactment of the small scale multi-unit housing, and that has opened up all the formerly single residential properties to now permit up to 4 units. And just to kind of give some context on how much change regulatory this means is, I mean, even since before 2022 OCP, nearly half the city did not even permit secondary suites. So we can see now we just have much more permission removing of zoning processes to allow people to proceed right to building permit. The Part B managing growth section has some more detailed changes of all the sections in the document. There are new policies to support better alignment between land use designation, permitted as of right densities through zoning, and infrastructure capacity and planning. And a recommended policy I'll just draw some attention to, because I think it connects to what we were talking about earlier, is to not approve major rezonings unless capacity can be proven or provided. We routinely see development applications with policy support to do their development, but not viable due to infrastructure needs. And so this policy will ensure that the homes that get zoning approvals can get built, but this policy also conveys clarity to the development applicants who are contemplating rezoning and may realize that the time is not yet right for it, if we could be more clear on that. So for instance, staff are eager to publish more detailed understanding of the infrastructure capacity within the water, sewer, and drainage system, so that this information will be part of an applicant's decision-making process right from the start, supporting more transparency in that process. And, you know, of course, we want to extend the life of our infrastructure. So, you know, the other thing with the water metering that supports that existing capacity, and we want to invest in new infrastructure as per tools like DCCs. There is a new policy section on supporting regional growth coordination and how the city will evaluate boundary extensions in accordance with the RGS, should and when the time come for that consideration. But to be clear, the OCP does not propose any boundary extensions for this review cycle. And a planning framework has been included on the types of local area plans that will be used to conduct more detailed planning in key growth areas as shown on this map. There are now added land use designation tables with the addition of densities which support staff in evaluating if a rezoning application meets the intent of the OCP. This table will dovetail with the zoning bylaw table to show exactly what zones enact which parts of the city's growth framework. The land use profiles have been minimally revised and perhaps unsurprisingly so, because the 2022 OCP already provided for a highly permissive growth framework. Just on this point, I'd like to make a very small correction on page 6 of the staff report, bullet 2 under land use designations. And the second sub-bullet under that, the paragraph says that up to 6 stories were already supported in the existing OCP for neighborhood centers. What it should read is that up to 4 stories were supported in the existing OCP, and that the recommendation is to support up to 6 stories in these growth centers. So just to clarify, there is a designation change in there recommended. There are only 10 parcels of land that are actually recommended to be redesignated, and 1 through 3 are part of the downtown. 4 and 5, and so yeah, that's part of its rationale to be part of the downtown, not urban corridor. 4 and 5 are urban residential. They're totally encircled by multi-residential designation, so that is there's some logic there. 6 and 7 are recommended to better support housing needs and mixed use in an area of high anticipated growth up in the Crown Isle area. And 8, 9, and 10 are all administrative fixes that we caught. Now, in terms of the thematic policies, the policy chapters identified on the screen include amendments, although all but the housing chapter have very targeted amendments, and they are either to align with more existing concurrent work, such as through the strategic transportation plan, and in particular, some of our conversations with Ministry of Transportation and Transit, or they are included to direct future standards to support a more urban Courtenay, such as by recognizing the Parks and Recreation strategic plan will have to be updated to reflect those new needs, or to develop operational clarity regarding development and environmentally sensitive areas. Now, what's changed is that there is a restructured and rewritten housing chapter to respond more clearly to the housing legislation needs and how we understand and approach housing today. So we have these more focused objectives before you. Formerly, we had 6 objectives, and a lot of people who've reviewed the document think that this is much clearer. And then we've also added policies to lend both flexibility in some instances and precision in others, such as establishing criteria for larger supportive housing and purpose-built emergency shelters so that site selection is clearly known, including for temporary emergency shelters. And the winter shelter strategy put into sharp focus how hard it can be to find such suitable locations when operating under a tight timeline. And then the OCP does, as it has in the past, continue to enable a wide range of housing options across all land uses, including within the residential neighborhoods, including emergency shelters. The previous OCP used a less specific term of transitional housing to include this use, but policy has been added to identify the importance of developing community integration guidelines where the use ultimately may be permitted, and that use would only be permitted through a rezoning. The chapter introduces the housing wheelhouse as a model to engage on and develop policy on this diverse and evolving topic. And I'd like to add that we can use tools like weighted wheelhouse to focus the policy, staff effort, and city resources by different segments, depending on the need of the day. So it can adjust over time. So that's just one tool to kind of be able to calibrate and be very clear on where we're spending our efforts. And of significance is the addition of Housing Policy 28, a policy to direct a staff work program on the creation of a below and non-market housing strategy to identify an appropriate and clear role for the city in supporting those forms of housing, these very harder to achieve forms of housing, in relation to the work of others, notably the Regional Housing Authority. Now, this work program would also identify the policy direction for the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, which was discussed earlier today. And last slide on what's changed is the growth contribution policies. Formerly, this section focused only on community amenity contributions, the tool we were using, the main tool for negotiating amenities related to the land lift associated with rezoning. But we were doing it without integrating the financial layering of the other growth contribution tools such as DCCs, now ACCs, and possibly even inclusionary zoning, but that is not recommended at this time. The inclusionary is not. So this section of I won't talk about DCCs and ACCs because we already have. I will point out that the CIC framework community amenity contribution continues to exist until such time as the density benefits can be evaluated further and amended into the zoning bylaw as part of phase 2 of that work. And the policy is that the density benefits will be used to secure below and non-market housing as a priority amenity because ACCs, if adopted, are contributing in part to amenity needs. As the inclusionary zoning, just for clarity, is a tool enabled by recent housing legislation that would allow a local government to require a certain percentage of units be affordable as part of the zoning permissions. And this is different than density bonusing, which would act as an incentive for a developer to develop some affordable housing in exchange for more market units. But again, the financial testing showed inclusionary zoning is not viable at this time, but we will review it with every OCP cycle. And as part of every cycle, there'll be regular land economics analysis. So that getting now to the topic of regular planning cycles, I'll just, I'll invite Kate up here, and just a little bit of an introduction is that the image on the left is the image that we designed to communicate how the OCP works with council strategic priorities and annual budgeting and work planning. And then the the Bill 44 has now allowed us to create a layer of integration and cycle with the dark blue and the green around it. And I'll just turn this to Ms. O'Connell.
Thanks very much, Nancy. As Nancy makes this all look very easy, but this has been a really long process that absolutely predated my time, and Nancy, with support from Jacob from the department, have really been keeping this project steadily on course, ensuring that all of council's policy directives and all the changes coming through legislation are appropriately incorporated. So with some of the changes that came out of the various legislations, we've always had the proactive planning cycle identified within the OCP. That has not changed from the 2022 version to the updated version that you're seeing before you today. Really, the big piece that's changing, and it's outlined within the administrative implication sections of the report, is identifying whether or not the bylaw itself, which my recommendation in removing this out of the bylaw or removing the priority list of the bylaw and into a more proactive, concerted program, is really the how are we actually going to achieve all of the myriad of items, whether they're policy objectives, target objectives, GHG objectives within the OCP, in a really connected and integrated way. We've had conversations when it comes to things like capital planning around sequencing and, you know, who's doing what first and what makes sense, and how are we all coordinating these various pieces of work together. The approach that's being recommended within the report itself under that administrative implication section and as part of the resolution sees the removal out of the bylaw itself and is seeking council direction to come forward with a report from staff with scoping options for the development of a full implementation strategy that would ultimately connect with financial planning cycles, combining all of those various strategies, including everything under the umbrella of the OCP. At the same time, this isn't a operational conglomeration of all our various work programs. It's really more along the lines of capturing the OCP priority items and putting them into one framework where we can make sure that we're taking advantage of every opportunity that comes before us as we're looking at how we're going to be achieving those major milestones over each of the 5-year cycles. So this was a requirement to look at that 5-year review, and really the mechanism on how to do that is presented as part of the resolution under this section. So I'm happy to answer questions about that. At the same time, right now, it is still conceptual, and with direction from council tonight, if it is supported, you would see a more in-depth options analysis or approach to the depth of what that implementation plan or strategy could look like post 2026 election for consideration for the newly elected council as part of their annual council strategic priority setting process.
And there's just one final slide, which is the just the next step. So tonight, before you use the opportunity to read the bylaw for first and second. And then there will be a 60-day statutory referral period that was identified back in April when we designed a community consultation plan, which the legislation requires happens right at the beginning. And so a number of bodies were named at that time and their letters will go out tomorrow. And then we did include the slide in here about the development industry meeting. We actually just spoke to them last week at our regular bi-monthly meetings. And the next meeting that we have scheduled with them is in April. And this will be an opportunity that if they want to prepare comments for the public hearing or some sort of submission that they want to prepare, they can access staff and we can use the scheduled development meeting that we already have as an opportunity for them to ask whatever they want. In that, we have talked to the development community a couple of times about the OCP at previous stages, but sometimes only when they see it all together, they might want to further ask questions of staff. So we'll use that opportunity for that. And then the public meeting we recommend be held on May 6th. And then there would be the third reading and actually third and fourth is permitted to happen by law on the same meeting. But if there's a need to make any changes after the public hearing, we could read the third reading separate from the fourth or et cetera. But in any case, we're looking in the summer for adoption. And with that, happy to take any questions any three of us might be able to answer.
Thanks so much for the information and the report. I'm looking to councillors to see if there's any questions or comments, and Councillor Frisch.
Well, thanks, Mayor. I was just going to say that was really thorough and thank you very much. And I'm happy to move the recommendation 1 of 2.
And moved and seconded. Are there any further questions or comments? Councillor, or did you have a further comment? Councillor Frisch, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. This is a huge piece of work, so I think we should probably pause and just say thanks to the staff and the consultants for pulling this in. And although some chapters were quite minor, the amount of work that the province has given us and you then translating this into our OCP. I have some questions about the implementation plan, but I'll start with the general amendments. And so specifically, the section around the environmental development approvals process and the changes. And I'm wondering if you can speak, I think it's policy NE 29. So the current language speaks to setback, this is regarding setbacks for riparian areas, and the language is a 30-meter riparian setback for streams boundaries wherever possible. And so what exactly is the change, and is that a staff level decision around the wherever possible? How do we interpret that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for that. So back in the 2022 OCP, that became a policy direction. We didn't have that prior to 2005, although the provincial legislation on riparian area protection regulations does permit a local government to exceed the minimum setbacks that their method generates. We just, with all the new legislation, we were wondering if some of, if our ability, local government ability was still there to do that. And we have confirmed legally that remains something should this council continue to want to have that high standard. There's a very small nuanced language, the language of exceed setbacks. It references back to the legislation that governs the riparian area protection regulations. So that, the fact that we may meet or exceed. So we say explicitly we want to exceed. Okay, so it's just a kind of a semantics piece there to dovetail better with their legislation. The other piece is it is the 29A is specifically directing staff to review the environmental development permit area guidelines. Again, they live within the zoning bylaw, so we can't change them in the OCP, but we can give policy direction to look at them in the zoning bylaw when we do the zoning bylaw update. And we do have language in there to support a 30-meter setback. Often biologists are coming back and they have rationales to simply support the provincial system, and we have been using that professional reliance in that way, with the confidence that we have the ability, even with the new legislation, to exceed the riparian minimums as established by the province. We just want to look at that language again in the guidelines in the zoning bylaw to understand, to make sure that we're where we can and where it makes sense, that we are being clear that we want the 30 meters. And it may not even always be 30 meters. It may just be simply more than what the minimum provincial is. But there might also be instances where it is not appropriate, given all the other goals out there for community growth, and housing being one of them, and this strong hammer that the province has that should they really want to see housing, we've also want to create the flexibility in the development permit guidelines so that people do not have to achieve the 30 should there be other provincial enactments that are coming along. So we're trying to not put ourselves in a corner and also not be in conflict with more senior regulations, but also create more clarity of what criteria would trigger a higher standard than the provincial minimum. So, and once that guideline language is in there, that is a decision. It's not so much that's a decision of staff. It is a tool that staff are responsible for reviewing, and ultimately it is the Director of Development Services who's been delegated the ability to issue environmental development permits, but they have to follow the guidelines. So basically, it's kind of like a pass-fail thing. Does the applicant meet the guidelines or not? And that's why we want to be more nuanced in being able to reflect when are those guidelines appropriate. So it's a very verbose answer, but I hope I got to it.
That is helpful. Yeah, I don't see other lights, so I'll just go on, Mayor, to my second clarification question. The next same section, NE 32. So the way I interpret this and how it's written in the staff report, so if this was a development that was occurring and there was an ESA, we are being more explicit in the policy that it's the requirement of the proponent to monitor prior to development, throughout development, and then we come and like what's the process for accountability here? I really appreciate this language, but in practice, what does this look like?
Yeah, so thank you again for the question through the mayor. So Natural Environment Policy 32 has four parts under it. So the first is recognizing that there are benefits to having fewer owners managing an environmentally sensitive area, just so that that feature can be managed more holistically. Inherently, when you have a lot of different decision makers, it could just make for more complicated management. So we say, first of all, that we are looking for that single ownership. It could be part of a strata. It could be dedicated to the city or another public entity. So it's not always required that it become city land. It doesn't always have to be. An environmentally sensitive area does not always have to be. But where it isn't, there's guidance in here to work with the applicant that it's at least under single ownership or single management. Then, and actually A and B actually both speak to that point. Then C goes on to say, regardless of who is owning it, we are looking for management plans, because what we have observed over time is that we're very clear on our tools for being able to protect and set setbacks of development from environmentally sensitive areas, but then there is not clarity on responsibilities and permissions to be able to manage that dynamic environmental system. And we know it's going to change. I mean, it's going to have invasive species. It might need fire, fuel, clearing. They're just hazard trees can show up, and so we want to understand at the time of the development what that management prescription is expected to be. And then the D recognizes the fact that the city of Courtenay has experienced some instances, particularly trees where there's high water tables, where once the city had taken the environmentally sensitive area as a park, that doesn't mean it's a usable park, but we call it parkland on a subdivision plan, that there were certain, as particularly the instance of a forest stand restabilizing after all the clearing happened around it, there were certain impacts that our operations team is having to absorb, and the tax base is having to absorb. With some foresight, we would like to examine tools to be able to build in that to part of the developer's responsibility and control. So, and that is what that one is speaking to. And this one we are still, we need to look into exactly what that means, but the policy is there to undertake that direction.
I don't see other lights, Mayor. Can I ask another question? It's now, thanks, Nancy. The implementation plan, really excited to see this and thanks for the explanation around the importance for this. And I appreciate that the timing is so that the next council term will be able to deliberate the prioritization of the objectives in the OCP. Obviously, some of our objectives have been completed in the OCP from 2020s, or the last iteration before this amendment, and some are in progress. And some I think a lot of staff have thinking on already. So I guess my curiosity is, given that there's going to be quite a lot of work around the planning and the identification around accountability and costing, how do we see in-stream projects that are meeting specific objectives in the OCP? As are we thinking that things will be on pause as we do this really important work of mapping out, or do things continue as is?
Thank you very much for the question. So really the component with the implementation plan, that is essentially the structure or the tool, the approach we would take to operationalize the items in order to achieve them. The processes, or whether or not it's something that causes a pause or a stop, those wouldn't necessarily be pauses or stops in that sense. It would be more along the lines of what makes sense to happen at what time. At the same time, unless we don't have direction to basically move backwards or to put moratoriums on certain things like that, we're already working towards achieving the policy objectives within the OCP. That doesn't change. So all of the work that we're undertaking, with or without the benefit of a broader implementation strategy, are already in line with the OCP objectives. This is just about enhancing the path to how we get there. So as Kyle Shaw will say, we're on a journey. I'm looking to make that journey in all the signs be very, very clear, covered in billboards, fastest route from A to B with the least amount of gas used getting there. So, and the nice thing about that is it also creates a reportable KPI framework for the OCP. So this would include identifying clearly how we're going to be measuring that success and the achievement of those pillars across the board in a really consistent way that is not solely interesting, but also very meaningful and measurable. And council will then, and the public will then have the benefit of understanding cause and effect more directly than just maybe what they may be personally experiencing in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I really appreciate you adding that last piece, because we have, of course, received some correspondence from folks who participated in the OCP development process over the 2 years saying, what's happening with this, right? Like how is council and the city progressing in implementing the objectives in the OCP? So I love the piece around the transparent accountability. And the staff report speaks to the efficiencies of interdepartmental planning. But I would also argue, because some of the objectives in each of the chapters also rely on community partners to be doing the work with us. I think about food security and art and cultural chapters specifically, we really rely on our community partners for that. So I think that extra layer of forecasting will allow our partners to be able to build up capacity to meet us on that journey together. So thanks for that.
It's like a carpool.
Yeah.
Yeah. In an e-vehicle, hopefully.
Fair enough. I don't see any other questions or comments at this point. And we have a mover and seconder, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. Okay. Been seconded as well. Thank you, Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So recommendation 2 of 2 is that council direct staff to develop a proposal for a standalone official community plan implementation plan with the goal of enhancing the city's effectiveness in translating OCP policy into action, and that staff be directed to report back to the newly elected council following the 26th municipal election for consideration as part of the 27 to 2030 council strategic priority setting process, with a report outlining the proposed scope of work required to fully develop the OCP implementation plan and cost options and resource implications for consideration as part of the 2027 financial planning process.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. All right, next, for adoption, we have the 2026 to 2030 financial plan bylaw 3211. Been moved and seconded. Councillor Schulker.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just to add to my comments at third reading, yeah, I think I continue to have some concerns around the resolution that we had. I actually went back and listened to last year's meetings where we discussed at length our concerns around the 5-year financial plan and gave staff direction. So it's still a little concerned that we don't have a reserve and surplus policy at this point. But particularly and having watched the meetings from last time, I had concerns around and a desire to see more work done on the revenue side of things. And in reviewing again the November committees of the whole, each of the departments did have a slide deck, and I would say most of them didn't identify any, definitely not any new revenue sources. However, there were a few that spoke to some of the existing revenue that they bring in, and that's I guess my first question is for fire protection. Our chief spoke about in his presentation that most revenue tools are cost recovery only, and I understand that we have a few contracts for fire, and I'm wondering if the chief can speak a little bit around the cost recovery model and if there's any opportunity for us to examine that with the intent of finding some opportunities for increased revenues.
Thank you for the question. So first off, the bulk of the revenue generated by the fire department is through our contract for services with the Courtenay Fire Protection District. Other ways that we're bringing in revenue right now are through provincial deployments for wildfires and also through working with the MCR through warming and cooling events. For example, the wildfires that we had at Wesley Ridge, we deployed some apparatus to that situation there, and we brought in about $20,000 gross through the province from helping out with that in 2025. Of course, netted out, you're going to pay for the wages and the equipment and fuel for the vehicles and stuff, but that is it's not necessarily a contract. However, what happens is that actually coincidentally bring this up, but on Friday, we have to have our list of equipment that we're able to deploy or willing to deploy to the province. They build their sheet of available apparatus. And then if the situations arise and they need the equipment, then they'll put the request in. So last year, we were fortunate to stay on the island and help out locally. In other years, we've been in Clinton, Williams Lake, so on and so forth. You know, as the situations change, we can count on there being wildfires each year, but we don't necessarily get deployed depending on their location. So we put in our availability, they call us. As for the warming events, so we just had one here on the weekend, I believe. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but it's the only one that we've had so far in tail end of 25, 26. The year before, stand corrected. So go in the winter season. So in the 24-25 winter season, we provided a number of outreach services and built the EMCR for those, and it generated $30,000 in gross revenue for the dates between January 19th and February 12th of 2025. This year we had a milder winter season, if you will. We've only been out once, and I can't tell you off the top of my head what the generation is. I will say though that the truck for the warming goes out at $350 an hour, and you can look online for it's called the interagency agreement, and that sets the rates for the fire department apparatus that goes out with the province. If it's a structural engine, for example, that goes out at 700 and change. If it's a wildland 6, it goes out at 384 and change. And again, public information, it's all on there. So those are, I mean, it generates revenue, yes, but it's not something that we rely on because again, you're waiting for the emergency to happen. So we've got that. Again, we talked about the fire protection district contract. In our area here, we're not really surrounded by any areas that don't have a fire protection agreement with somebody. So there really is a very small market for us to generate extra revenue by seeking new contracts because they're already spoken for. And again, through cost recovery, through fire inspections or municipal ticketing and that, it doesn't generate a whole lot of revenue. 1,800 inspections, you're not going to generate a whole lot with that. But those basically are the main revenue sources that not only our fire department, but just about every other fire department in the province would have access to.
And Mr. Garber?
Thanks. If I could just add, with respect to the opportunities for fire protection, contracted services, to Chief McDonald's comment, if there was an interest in making a change, I think it's a good opportunity and we would engage in that. Unless the situation, anticipating the situation to stay the same, then there isn't that opportunity. But I think, again, when questioned about this revenue generation, I've told council that we're not permitted to make money on items, but if there are opportunities through shared services or contracting, we would certainly explore that. So I would say in this is an excellent example of our long-standing service arrangement. And if there was an opportunity and we could both protect our assets, which is number one, and contribute to the community, we would certainly do that. And it's one item that council may recall we did speak to at AUBCM about the efficiencies, and it was part of our argument for funding for our second fire hall, is that there is an efficiency there in that we can provide that service, so another tax dollars don't have to go towards that in over and above a service arrangement. So I really appreciate the question, and our eyes are continue to be wide open for future contracting opportunities.
Let's see another light, Mayor. So my next thanks for that, City Manager. Probably for our CFO. Do we have at this point an understanding February 25th of our surplus? Particularly curious around our operational surplus from 2025.
No, we do not at this time.
Okay. And do we have an updated total for the fire hall?
The fire hall is in the budget at $18 million currently. It has been reduced from prior year's estimation of $23 million.
Yeah. So the current financial plan has it at 18?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, Mayor, I don't see any other lights, so I'll just maybe share a comment.
I just wasn't sure if the fire chief had a comment there as well. You're good? Okay. Councilor McCollum.
Yeah, just gonna follow up on that question. It was my understanding when we first passed or when we passed for second and third reading that we would actually, I think the question even predates for second and third reading, but I understood that we would have a clearer sense of what the actual cost of the fire hall was going to be. And maybe while we're on the topic, if we could get clarity on when we'll have more certainty around the cost.
Chief McDonald.
Can't give you the exact date, but I know the Class C estimate is being worked on. Right now, we've had the benchmark for 50% design. 70% is next week, then the Class C estimate. So I don't have the schedule in front of me, but it's going to be, I would say, within the next few months that we will have a better indicator of what we're looking at.
Thanks for that. Councilor.
Yeah, I don't see any other lights on, so I'll just share my final comments. Yeah, I won't be supporting final adoption, particularly again, without repeating my previous comments, but we have quite an ambitious and important 5-year capital plan, and actually longer, with very important projects in the community, much of which we don't have control over those costs, whether they be from supply chain, market fluctuations, or external labor costs. And so my focus of questioning has primarily been around our operational budget, which is set to be just over $79 million this year, of which 29.8 million is wages and benefits, which is about 32% of total expenditures. And so in the absence of a formal service review, That's why I was really looking forward to seeing some outcomes from our motion last year around efficiencies. And so, looking at the forecast for 2027 and 2028, I know that council has considered a lot around our surplus and how we can use surplus to reduce the tax burden this year. But the next 2 years, mostly because of the capital costs, the increases are set to be quite significantly higher. And I just generally feel like we are pushing down a conversation for future years that I believe we need to have around our operational expenses, given that we don't have large controls over our capital plan. So for that, I won't be supporting the financial plan as presented.
Okay, and I don't see any other questions or comments at this point. I think we did that. Yeah, I think you were on it already. Yeah, I that's my recollection. That being said, all those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Zolliker opposed. Next, we have the public notice bylaw 3210, and I'm not sure that we need a, yeah, thanks. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I think it's a pretty straightforward one. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. Did you get the mover and second? Okay, excellent. Motion carries. And councillor reports, Councillor Zolliker, Councillor McCollum, Councillor Cole Hamilton, Councillor Frisch, Councillor Morin.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm not going to report on any activities. I've been generally handing those in written form, but we didn't talk about it at the beginning of the meeting, but we are all wearing pink shirts. So I just wanted to acknowledge that it is Anti-Bullying Day, and that's why we're all wearing pink. And we certainly are seeing a lot of bullying across the world in various forms. So I think it's always important to try to remember whenever we're in conversation and dialogue, whether that's in person or online, and modeling for our kids that it's important. I heard that the Speaker of the House was chastising people in higher government this week around decorum. So I just think it's really important to emphasize that, and that is the reason we're all wearing pink. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Councillor Morin and Councillor Hillian. Yeah, appreciate that. I did have some comments on Pink Shirt Day, but Councillor Morin, you did a fantastic job. A couple of things I just wanted to mention that have happened recently. One was the Cupid bus, which some councillors were on that, bringing goodwill and cheer to the community. But more seriously, the Community Justice Center put on an anti-racism event, which again, some councillors were able to make that. And it was great to see our community come out for that. And they are putting on more events. So just want to give them a plug for people that are wanting to get involved and be part of that. And then lastly, today I attended the Wounded Warrior event at 888 Wing. And with that, we have an in-camera resolution, but there is Councillor Morin, you want to make an amendment?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I do want to move the in-camera motion, but I would like to add section 91E and 91K.
Okay. And I don't know that we really need to amend it because we haven't moved it. So if you add C, I think we're.
Yeah, just as written and add in E and K.
That's exactly, yep, perfect. And that's been seconded. So all those in favor? And motion carries, and we are adjourned.